Chapter 1, We Need to Talk. 293 AC. Eddard. He stood upon the battlements after dawn, as he looked on the fields of his lands. He heard the castle slowly awaken and saw the first farmers walk onto their fields in the distance. He stood there taking in the so familiar and relaxing sounds of the morning. It will be weeks before it is this quiet and relaxing again, he thought to himself whilst thinking on Rob's upcoming name day celebrations. Rob's 10th name day was in 2 weeks, but the first of his bannermen would be arriving today. They came to feast his son and celebrate this year's harvest festival. Although he was looking forward to seeing some of his old friends and war companions again, he was feeling apprehensive at the unavoidable decorum and politicking that would go along with it. Just the thought of Roose, and another one of his sly requests to better House Bolton in contrast to his other vassals, was making him dread the next few weeks. He looked upon the rising sun in the distance and thought about many things, his lands, family and past as always chief among them. Half an hour later, he walked back to the keep and saw Kat steer the household for the festivities with practiced ease, an ever-dutiful Veon Poole to her side. After making sure that he was not needed, he headed to his solar to finish his work on the harvest numbers and taxes and prepare himself for the coming meetings with his lords. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he said routinely. "Glover and Mormont banners have been spotted, my lord," Alyn told him when he entered his solar. Standing up, he replied. "Thank you, Alyn. Go and get Lady Caitlin and our children to meet me in the courtyard." Snapping to attention, Alyn answered right away, "My lord," before leaving the room. He easily walked across the castle towards the courtyard. Arriving there, he started routinely arranging the present household, before Kat arrived with a dutiful Sansa in tow. He smiled at his beautiful eldest daughter, who looked so much like his wife already. Behind Sansa, lively little Arya was laughing with Bran. His little son running towards him from the moment he saw him. Arya, not wanting to get left behind, raced after him, and not long after he was tackled by his two smaller children. Getting them both in his arms, he started laughing while Arya immediately started babbling over some stick she and Brandon had found this morning in the Godswood. "Arya and Brandon Stark, behave yourself like the little lady and lord you are before you shame your father in front of his bannermen." Kat started scolding them. He walked over to her with the children to reassure her the Glovers and Mormonts would never take offense of two lively young Starklings, only to be interrupted by the running arrival of his two eldest sons. He put down the children on the insistence of his wife and arranged the children in a line, with Rob and then Jon to his right and Caitlin, followed by the other children, to his left. It wasn't long before Galbert and Robert Glover entered the courtyard together with the new Lady Mage Mormont and her eldest daughter Daisy. Both women were dressed in light furs. He also noticed their maces loosely hanging from their belts. The Glover men were in similar dress, although their belts brandished swords instead. After bowing their heads to show their respect, they warmly embraced him one by one. "Ah, Ned, it's good to see that you and your family are in so good health." Galbert laughed while clapping him in a hug. Lady Mage, however, looked at him apologetically, still trying to make up for her nephew's treason a few months prior. He immediately reassured her by warmly introducing her and her daughter to Kat and the children. He had known Mage since Robert's rebellion. She would do well for House Mormont and bring back stability to the island. Kat, although every part the gallant lady, looked warily at Mage and her daughter Daisy. Still, after all these years, not used to the eldest warrior women of Bear Island. His gaze didn't fail to realize young Arya. His youngest daughter looked on with wonderment and admiration at the two warrior ladies, all the while he and Kat were exchanging pleasantries. "Come in, I have rooms prepared for you in the keep, whilst rooms in the barracks have been made ready for your men," he said respectfully while faintly hearing Arya mutter something to Bran behind him about Farah wearing his lord's face again. If this keeps up it will be an interesting few weeks, he thought to himself. This ritual went on for another 2 weeks until houses Glover, Mormont, Hornwood, Umber, Carstark, Bolton, Marndale, Risswell, Sewin, Tallheart, Slate, Locke, both Flints and many more smaller houses were gathered into Winterfell. Almost the whole northern nobility had gathered here, with the only obvious absentee being Lady Barbary Dustin. It was the day after the feast, and while sitting wearily in his solar, he was secretly happy that most of his vassals would be leaving upon the morrow. He wouldn't have to sit through any more talks about wounded pride or reduced harvest taxes for a while, he pondered smugly. His happy thoughts didn't last long though, as they were abruptly disrupted when he heard sounds at the door. When the door opened, Desmond peeped his head in. "My lord, Lady Mormont and Lords Umber, Marndale and Carstark are here to see you." Confused, he responded to Desmond to let them in. As they entered his solar, all 4 members of the northern nobility looked upon him sternly. "Mage, John, Ricard, Wyman, what is the meaning of this? Has something happened?" he asked some of his most trusted lords. "We need to talk, Ned." John replied without his usual energetic attitude. "What is this about, John?" he asked whilst looking upon his vassals. "The future of the North and House Stark," Wyman calmly answered. "My lords. Do you have a problem with anything I have done at the feast? If so, I believe this can easily be settled," he responded, as he tried to get a grip on the situation. "No, Ned, you have done nothing wrong. We are here more to speak on something you didn't do than anything else." Ricard joined in cryptically. "My lords, explain yourself." He managed to get out angrily. His bannerman could come to him with anything, but he didn't like this cryptic showing in the slightest. "Oh bugger this," John Umber shouted, "you're acting like a damn southerner, Ned, and we don't like it. Your beautiful Andal lady and her southern ways ain't helping either." Perplexed, he looked at his loud friend for a few moments, after collecting his thoughts and realizing what had just been said about him and his family. The rare drops of wolf blood in him started rising. "What is this outrage? You come into my home, into my own solar, and you dare to insult me and my wife," he declared whilst trying to control his anger. "Ned, sit down please." "We are not trying to insult you," Wyman said. "We're trying to do what's best for the North and are here to give our advice, nothing more, I promise," the Fat Lord of White Harbor continued more diplomatically. Before he could respond, Mage followed up. "No one blames you personally, Ned, but due to your fosterage in the Vale and your subsequent marriage to Lady Caitlin, who although a great lady of the castle is still not from the North, you are behaving way too southernly. What could you possibly have to say about my ways or those of my lady wife?" He grunted angrily. He respected all the people in front of him, but the gall to come over to him and insult his family was too much. "For fuck's sake, Ned, a September in Winterfell for starters. We didn't beat back those Andals for thousands of years to bring them and their blasted ways with you in your marriage bed," John Umber sputtered out angrily. "Not to mention that blasted Septa who seems to follow your wife and daughters around like a hawk," Ricard muttered. He looked around the room incredulously. "Really, that's your problem? A September and a Septa?" "It's not only that, Ned," Wyman added. "It's how this castle is being run. It feels like I'm in a southern keep sometimes, not the hearth of the North. Even you, Wyman. Doesn't your family believe in the Seven anyway?" he asked, perplexed. The Marndale is complaining about things being too southern or the presence of the new gods. He couldn't believe his ears. "Aye, we do, but even my granddaughters aren't being brought up half so piously as those daughters of yours. Besides, from getting a look at it, the smallest doesn't like it one bit more than we do." Wyman sighed, looking at him apologetically. "So what do you propose then?" he asked pensively, shocked at the revelation that even the greatest followers of the Seven in the North thought Caitlin's scepter was a problem. The complete absurdity of it made his anger dissipate. He would try to look at this with a clear head, although he still didn't see a problem. "To get that woman to stop poisoning your daughters, while you still can. Give them a northern governess just like the rest of us bloody had. It may do for my mother and my wife, it'll do for your bloody daughters, Ned," John said indignantly. "Or if you really need a damn septon or scepter, get a northern one in White Harbor instead of that blasted Riverlander woman. In only 2 weeks it has become clear to me that she knows nothing of the North and doesn't teach anything about it to your daughters, however charming the eldest may be. That will not do for a daughter of House Stark," Mage said defyingly. "So that's it. You're worried about the upbringing of my daughters?" he grunted under his breath. "No, that's not all, Ned. You must understand the northern houses have not gotten a Stark marriage for 2 generations now. Meanwhile, most of your children look like Southerns. Your daughters are being prepared for southern matches. A damn September has been built in the hearth of the north, and not a house in the north has gotten an offer of fostering in. Ricard Karstark said to him calm but sternly. Fostering? Who, Rob? Have I also heard it right, and are you disrespecting my children, amongst them my heir, all because they look like their mother? He asked, his rage starting to rise once more. No, Ned, we would never presume to do so. We are trying to tell you that we, even the most loyal northern lords, feel like House Stark is losing its connection with the north with everything that's happening as a whole. You, our lord, were fostered in the south. Your wife is from the south. She brought with her southern ways and a southern religion, in which your daughters are being groomed. To top it all off, it seems like House Stark has no intention to bond itself with their northern houses either through fostering or betrothals. That is an evolution no true Northman or woman can look upon without fear. Mage explained, and although harsh, no disrespect could be heard in her voice. He wanted to react equally as harsh, but when he saw three other lords grunt and nod in support for what the new Lady of Bear Island had just said, it made him pause. He started to really think on her words. Did Caitlin want Sansa and Arya to be married into the south? Was that what that scepter was preparing them for? Is it dumb of him not to foster Rob? Rob is 10 and he had already been fostering in the Vale at the age of what, 8? His elder brother Brandon had also been fostering at Barrow Hall by the age of 10, hadn't he? Jon broke up his thoughts when he said gruffly to him. All of us here followed you into war twice, Ned, for the honor of House Stark and the North, and we would all gladly do it again a third time. We just don't want it to be in vain. Turning to his old friend, he calmed down and did his best to sound as honest and respecting as he could. House Stark appreciates your sacrifice, Jon, I appreciate it. I will think about what all of you said and what to do with it. However, whatever I decide to do, I can promise you now that House Stark will never forget the North and the blood of the first men that runs through its veins, through mine and my children's. You can be very sure of that. Jon squeezed his eyes to slits and looked at him suspiciously for a short moment before laughing and clapping him on the shoulder. That's all we wanted to hear, Ned. House Umber's yours as always. We wouldn't want to miss the next time we can go kill some southern cunts with you. The others in the room nodded and also reconfirmed their loyalty to him without him detecting a hint of any dishonesty. Afterwards they all left, but not before Wyman sent him a reassuring smile his way while telling him Lord Rob is always welcome at White Harbor to talk about trade or if he has any more questions. The doors of the Mondaelis are always open, the Starks. When the door finally closed behind them, he let out a sigh he didn't knew he had been holding in. Afterwards, he moved to his desk to ponder all that had been said today. He really had a lot to think upon. Before that, however, he was going to have to ask his wife about her intentions for their children and subtly check upon the education of Sansa and Arya. If only a fraction of what his bannerman thought was true, he had a serious problem in his keep. Chapter 2, Thinking About Alliances. 293 AC. Eddard. He woke up next to Kat from the heat, as he did most of the times when he slept in her chambers. It seemed to be just after dawn. Laying there in bed, not willing to wake her, he started thinking about what he had planned for today. More talks with Lewin about taxes and harvests came to his mind. It had also been 2 days since he had the conversation with his vassals in his solar, and some fragments of the conversation kept ringing in his head. As almost all of his vassals had left, he finally had to start doing something about it. The only holdout so far was Lord Meager, who lived closest to Winterfell and could as such get to his keep more easily if problems arose there. Making up his mind, he decided that he would look into Sansa's education and start evaluating her scepter before midday. In addition, he would have a word with Septon Chael to see how he was doing and get a better measure of the man. He also thought more about the idea of fostering. He himself had loved his time fostering, and it had given him invaluable allies in his mentor Jon Arryn and his friend the now King Robert Baratheon. The reason he had never wanted any fostering was the fact that he had lost so many of his family already, with first father, Brandon and Lyra, and then losing Ben to the Night's Watch. He simply hadn't been prepared to lose any more, even if it was only for a few years. While that sounded selfish even to himself, there had also been the future of House Stark to think about. The once big family had after the war been reduced to him, Rob and Jon. The small pack needed to stick together to survive. Now however, with the births of Sangza, Arya and Bran, and who knows another healthy babe in the future, that wasn't so much of a problem anymore. He started pondering about the fostering more and who of his children to send. Would he be able to placate the lords with just a single fostering? Or would it be better to think about the little ones being sent somewhere too in the future? When he realized he was not the only one his father had sent to foster, he realized sending but one of his 5 children would not do. No, his father had set a strong precedent about fostering in House Stark. He had sent his heir Brandon to the Dustins to placate the northern lords. He himself, the spare, was sent to the Vale to foster relations outside the kingdom with houses Arryn and Baratheon. It were shrewd moves from his father to send his sons away like that. There was also obvious merit in it, as his house had never been more secure as then. This had clearly been shown by the vigor with which his vassals had come down south with him to avenge his father and brother. He decided to talk to Lewin in the afternoon about the idea of fostering. Afterwards, he would also have to have a talk with Kat about it. It would only be fair that she had her say in the matter, and he knew he could always count on her counsel. By then his thoughts were interrupted when he noticed Kat looking at him. "Good morning," he smiled at his beautiful wife. She smiled sleepily at him and laid herself on his shoulder. They lay there together contently for some time, after which the heat finally got to him and he had to get up to open a window and let the cold northern winds in. He felt the winds streak across his naked torso and sighed contently, before turning to his wife who had bundled herself together in the furs. Laughing slightly, he gave her a kiss on her cheek and started to dress himself for the day ahead. After making sure nothing special had happened on the guard's rounds last night, he walked into the great hall to break his fast. He saw Maester Lewin and sat himself down next to him, as none of his family was present yet. After rescheduling their meeting to this afternoon, which Lewin did without complaint, he asked Lewin to look into all of the Stark fosterings since Aegon's conquest. "Fosterings, my lord?" "Are you sure?" the Maester asked, surprised. "Yes, Lewin. It has come to my attention that some of my vassals have started questioning the fact Robb isn't being fostered, along with the fact no plans have been made for the other children. I won't be deciding anything yet on the matter, but it is something I want to look into," he explained to the ever-dutiful Maester. Lewin nodded pensively before he stood up. "If that is all, my lord, I must get to work. I have many generations of Starks to comb out before our meeting. Let us meet a little after the midday meal. Would that suit you for our meeting, my lord?" "That would be perfect, Lewin, you have my thanks as always," he replied thankfully. Lewin nodded again and left him to his thoughts once again. After eating the rest of his sausages, he got up and strolled out of the great hall to pray. On his way to the Godswood he passed the little September he had built for Kat and pondered on whether to enter right now. Later, their gods can wait, he thought, and walked on. After saying his prayers, he went on to the chambers where Sansa would be having her lessons with Septa Mordane. Seeing they had already started and that little Arya had joined too, he listened at the door. He must have stood there for at least half an hour and all he heard were mundane things. How to behave, techniques for embroidery, a story of some fabled knight and lady and a religious story or two, nothing for him to worry about. Just as he was preparing to leave, he heard the Septa scold his youngest daughter. "Arya Stark, do not say something like that ever again. Beware, some young respected lordling hears you slander the gods and you will never find a respected family to marry into." He heard his younger daughter respond with all the courage a 4-year-old could muster. "What does it matter if someone hears me? They are not their gods anyway. They pray to the white tree like Farah, I saw them do it on the visit." "Arya, that's not true. Lord Marndale and his granddaughters pray to the Seven as well. Besides, Septa Mordane doesn't mean any of the northern boys. She means a good southern family like Mother's house. Isn't that right, Septa?" his daughter asked, clearly seeking the Septa's approval. "Yes, Sansa, that's true. As daughters of a Lord Paramount, you will most likely be marrying into one of the other great houses once you flower. Who knows, maybe even a prince with your father's friendship to King Robert. All of those houses follow the way of the Seven and the 7-point star, so you should learn to adapt to these ways." "Oh, to marry a prince, how wonderful would that be?" he heard Sansa sigh blissfully. "I don't want to marry a prince and go south, I wanna stay here." He heard his youngest daughter mutter. "Enough, Arya, this will not be tolerated. Marrying a prince is the highest honor a lady of your standing can receive. Now focus on your embroidery, watch how Sansa does it." He left as he had heard enough. He knew his family history more than enough to realize just how wrong the scepter was. Before him, no Stark son had ever married into another Lord Paramount's house, and except for the daughter of the king who married an Arryn, and his own sister Lyanna, no such marriages for their daughters were made or planned. Knowing how both that marriage and betrothal ended, it was safe to say he wasn't keen on letting his daughters leave the north. Let alone the fact that he would educate them to that end. He thought long and hard on how his own daughter had dismissed the future lords of the north as simple boys just because they didn't follow the 7-point star, and the fact that the scepter had supported her. He decided that couldn't do, and he needed to have words with her, but first he needed to talk to Cat about it. It was her scepter she brought from the Riverlands, and he needed to know if she supported this idea or not. He also smiled at the reaction of his willful little girl. At least if he reacted now, that was one girl his vassals never had to worry about believing some southern fancies. While walking in the hallway towards his solar, he stumbled upon Major Sawin waiting for him. "Ah Ned, I was waiting for you. I wanted to discuss something, if you have the time." "Sure Major, have a seat," he said whilst entering his solar. The apparent talk was about repairs to the King's Road between Sawin and Winterfell and the possible costs. After agreeing to the initial proposal and promising to look into the financial side of it, a thought hit him. "Major, you have a daughter, don't you?" he asked. "Yes Ned, she is called Jonelle Y," he replied hesitatingly, fully realizing that a daughter who was an unmarried maid at 26 was not something that looked good in front of your liege lord. "Well, I was thinking about the education of my own daughters and was interested on how you managed yours," he replied evenly. "Oh," his bannerman replied, "we got her a governess from our vassal house Condon. Some old maid who taught her about the womanly ways, as well as the gods and the houses of the north, that sort of thing." He mused, "Is this lady still around so that I could have a talk with her?" "Alas, no Ned, she died last winter of a chill." Jonelle took it pretty hard. "But if you're looking for a governess, I could ask Jonelle if she would be willing to look after your daughters. It would be our honor to look after the next ladies of House Stark. Is it for the little willful one?" he added hopefully. "No Major, I was just thinking about taking more of an interest in my daughter's education from now on, that's all right now. I thank you for your offer though, and I will keep it in mind if I ever need a governess," he replied diplomatically, not wanting to offend his bannerman after such a generous offer. "Any time Ned, as I said we'd be honored," he said evenly. After letting Lord Sawin out of his solar, he contemplated the idea. Having a daughter of one of his bannermen take up part of his daughter's education would go a long way to ease his vassals' worries and might even bring Arya to like it more. He put it aside for now, as he needed to assess the situation further and also talk to Cat first. After preparing some work for this afternoon with Lewin, he realized he hadn't gone to talk to the Septon yet and didn't have too much more time before the midday meal. He stood up and walked over to the September. As he entered the September, he saw the Septon cleaning the statues of his gods. He saw the statue of the father, the warrior and the smith. Standing behind the Septon must be Cat's most beloved ones of the crone, the mother and the maiden. Statues he had made in White Harbor at her behest, a few years back. When he saw him enter, the Septon greeted him warmly although curiously, as he hadn't stepped inside the September more than a handful of times in all these years. He asked the man if he was happy in the castle, as most didn't follow his faith, and if he felt at home at all. After which Septon Chale told him he grew up on the White Knife close to White Harbor and that he was used to the old gods and the seven living side by side there. He also profusely expressed how honored he felt as a Northman for helping Lady Stark and their children with their questions about their faith. Realizing that he actually enjoyed the presence of the other man, he stayed to talk for a while longer about any number of things. When it was time to go for the midday meal, he felt immensely relieved as he thought that building the September for Cat had not been a mistake. It might just be the Southern Scepter, not their faith as a whole. After spending time with his family at the meal and helping Cat with Bran and Arya while making small talk to Lord Major, he headed to his solar. Lewin was already there waiting, 3 great tomes sitting under his arm. "Be welcome Maester," have you found anything on the subject I have asked you about? He asked patiently while the maester put the tomes on the other side of his desk. Yes, my lord, I think I found everything you will ever need about the subject. With this he picked up 3 handwritten lists out of his sleeves and laid them over to him on the desk. The first one is a list of all the fosterings Stark heirs have been on since the conquest. It seems that almost all Stark heirs were fostered someplace or the other, although some earlier than others, he said as he slid the lists over. The second list is a list of all the fosterings of spares, latter sons, cousins and the like. It also, at the bottom, includes your own, my lord. The maester said as he looked at a long list of Starks and numerous places all over the north, with only his own as standing out to be in the south. As he switched his attention to the smaller list, the maester said, the last much smaller list is a list of female fosterings of Stark daughters, granddaughters or female cousins. It seems the old lords of Winterfell liked to keep their daughters close most of the time, although it did happen from time to time. Musing over the names and places on all of the 3 the lists, he saw multiple mentions of Barrowtown, Castle Sewin, Mormont Keep and even a 4th son that had been sent to one of the mountain clans. However, by far the most mentions referred to his stronger bannermen with Last Hearth, Carhold and White Harbor. A noticeable absentee on the list was the Dread Fort, although not surprising knowing their families' histories. As you can see, most of the heirs are sent to the most powerful loyal bannerman Umber, Karstark or Marndale. Other houses have had the honor mostly on the grounds of friendship with the then Lord Stark, as your father's friendship with the old Lord Dustin showed in your brother's fosterage. Lewin added helpfully. If I were to think about fostering my children, where would you send them? He asked his maester while still looking at the lists. All of them, my lord. Lewin asked surprised. Just as an experiment of thought, even if we would choose some action, none of the younger children will be fostered for years anyway. He dismissed the remark. Well my lord, there is also the thing of marriage to consider. Lewin slowly replied. Marriage? He looked up sternly into his maester's grey eyes. What has that to do with fostering? Well, in more circumstances than not, the Stark son who went to foster ended up marrying some relative of the lord he stayed at, be it for love or to strategically strengthen the bonds on 2 further generations. So you are saying that if I foster my son with one of my bannermen, that they will most likely end up marrying their daughter? He asked his maester. Most likely my lord, and the lord in question will be trying for it either way. It might come off as an offense to refuse them after caring for your child for several years. Lewin added wisely. Or the other way is also possible. Remember, your sister's betrothal was made because of your own fostering with King Robert Baratheon. He pondered over that. If so, and he had no doubt about it, the question where to send his heir just became a lot harder. After thinking for a while, he finally asked Lewin, still maester, it doesn't exactly change my question, what would you advise me to do? Looking surprised up at him for a few moments, the small maester eventually started speaking. Well, for Lord Robb I would advise either Carhold of White Harbor, Karstark or Marndale. Why? He simply asked. Well my lord, the Karstarks are an old and strong family descendant of your own house. It would be easily explainable that you would wish Lord Robb to learn about the north with his distant kin. A possible marriage, be it Lord Robb to Lord Karstark's young daughter or Sansa to his eldest son, would also strengthen and legitimize your house with all the old far northern families, not only House Karstark. It could also teach him more about old traditions of the north, the wall and the wilderling situation. He mused, growing up that far north might indeed endear him to the Umbers, the clans and the Mormonts as well, and House Marndale would have totally different benefits, my lord. As the Marndales follow the Seven, the idea might be looked on more favorably by your wife and many other Southrons. The Marndales are also staunchly loyal to your family and the strongest family in the north monetarily. In peacetime we get most of our taxes from them and their trade. Furthermore, they field excellent heavy horse and have the means to pay for a lot of sellswords, if war would ever occur again. In addition to that, the maester continued, it would also give him the possibility to learn a lot about trade and as such better the North's position in the future. A Marndale marriage might also bring a great dowry to your coffers as well as a possible inheritance of White Harbor to a second-born Stark son one day, as Lord Marndale has no grandsons to carry on his house for the moment. He nodded whilst adding, not House Umber. I don't think any more benefits could be made with the Umbers than can be made with the Carstarks. House Umber also lacks the familiar bonds to your house and although very loyal, are a more direct people where Lord Rob might forget the nuances needed to deal with certain scheming houses. I think you might be right there. He mused while thinking back on John's outbursts in his solar 2 days ago. Thank you, Maester, that will be all on this subject for now as I need to think it over and have a talk with Lady Caitlin about it as well before we talk about any of the other children. Let us continue with the planned harvest talks for now. Chapter 3, Marital Disagreements. 293 AC. Eddard. After his long talk with Lewin yesterday, he had gone to relax and think about all that had been said. As he came back, he found he didn't have the stomach to go over it with Kat again and so he had enjoyed a simple evening in the company of his wife and children. He had told Rob, John and Sansa stories of Theon the Hungry Wolf. Rob and John had loved them, while Sansa had looked scared and found them unknightly. She felt better after he took her in her arms and started telling him the story would be better if there was some tragic princess in there. Even his ward Theon seemed to appreciate it, as he imagined himself as Theon the Hungry Kraken. Arya and Bran he had taken on his lap and asked about their day and what they loved to do. Whisperingly promising he would let them practice dueling with their sticks once, if they were nice to their mother and attentive in their lessons. This morning in bed with Kat he realized he had to talk to her, but he didn't want to spoil their blissful morning. So, after enjoying each other's company in the morning and breaking his fast with his whole family together, he took Kat apart and asked if they could speak of some things. Surprised and slightly anxious she accepted, and after delegating some of her early morning chores to Veonpool and Septum Ordain she followed him into his solar. Kat, we need to talk about the children, he said after offering her a seat. The children, Ned. Has something happened? Has Arya done anything untoward again? Caitlin asked perplexed. No, none of the children have done anything to displease me, Kat. I want to talk of their futures with you. As it is only reasonable you have a say in what happens to them as well. He replied calmly, whilst trying to sound reassuring. A say in what happens? What are you planning, Ned? They are only little children. What would possibly need to happen? Caitlin asked, still not understanding anything about the situation. Rob is 10, Kat, he isn't a little babe anymore. It is time we start to plan his future together. Some of my bannermen have already started asking me why he isn't being fostered yet. Besides that, I have started to notice that Septum Ordain is preparing Sansa for a southern life and match. I wanted to ask you what you knew about that, he said, while looking warmly yet intense into her blue eyes. Startled she looked at him for a while before hesitatingly answering yes, Rob is definitely of an age that he could be fostered. Although you never spoke of any desire to do so before now, so I'm surprised with this reasoning now. Who were the vassals that complained? She asked at the end. Openly. Mormont, Umber, Carstark and Marndaly. Less openly I think that in hindsight many a lord might have been wondering that, while asking after his health. Those are some of the strongest lords in the north. She exclaimed wide-eyed. Exactly, which is why we are having this conversation. He subtly pointed out. Well, have you had any thought on it? Caitlin asked him, suddenly very interested in the conversation. I have gone through it with Lewin yesterday and he tends to favor a fostering at either the Carstarks or the Marndalis for Rob. I tend to agree with him, if we decide to do any fostering at all. He said matter-of-factly. Well, Lord Wyman always has been a gracious and well-mannered guest although more than a bit gluttonous. I don't know why you would consider Lord Ricard at all. We won't be sending our son into those dreary cold forests that far north, will we? What values could he learn our son up there? Fostering is about a lot more than manners and values, Kat. It's about building solid alliances and bonds that can last a lifetime, sometimes even multiple generations. My father didn't send me down to the Vale to be thought about honor, he sent me down there to solidify an alliance between House Stark, House Arryn and House Baratheon. An alliance. Ned, these are your vassals. Surely you don't need to ally yourself to them. Caitlin asked judgmentally. Really, Kat? You come from of the Riverlands. Even with your parents' marriage and your father and uncle's squiring, Your house couldn't get the whole of the Riverlands behind them when we rose up against the Mad King. The only reason the North is somewhat different is because we, the Starks, have been fostering and intermarrying with those houses for thousands of years. He lectured her softly. She looked slightly offended at how he worded his response, so he decided to carry on to try to not get into a discussion about. Lewin made me an overview of all the heirs of House Stark since the conquest. It seems Robb is one of the only ones who hasn't fostered, although there were some who only started at his age. He continued. She looked at him with wide eyes. You're not just trying to foster him, are you? You're finding him a wife. The boy is only 10 years old, Ned. You can't do this. He was surprised at his wife's quick thinking, although he should have known better. Calm down, he said reassuringly to his wife. I won't be taking any betrothals for Robb for at least a few years. However, Lewin pointed out that most of the fosterings, where there is a female close to the boy's age, do tend to result in a marriage. Sometimes it is for strategical reasons, other times out of love. I would not stand in the way if my boy comes back saying he wants to marry his foster father's daughter Cat. Therefore, we need to be very sure where we send him. Oh yes, that makes sense, Ned, but please promise me you won't be accepting any proposals until he is at least close to coming of an age. Besides, Robb could do a lot better than a Karstark or even a Mandaeli. His wife sighed relieved. I promise you, Cat. However, what do you mean with he could do better? They are both some of my strongest bannermen, and such a union would tie the North together a lot stronger for future generations. He replied questioningly. Well, Ned, he is the son of a Lord Paramount, and besides that the grandson of another. He will easily be one of the most eligible bachelors of Westeros when he comes of age. He might marry a lady from House Tyrell or Lannister, even a Baratheon isn't of the charts. I heard that besides the princess, Lord Stannis had a daughter, close to his age as well. Either one of those would help improve his standing in the kingdoms one day. She said happily. And do you think the same about Sansa? He replied, already knowing the answer that would come and thinking it better to ask this now. Of course. She already is such a beautiful girl. She could be marrying very high up, Ned. If only you could talk to Robert, we might have a shot at making her queen. If not the prince, then maybe Lord Renly, as he is still a bachelor. If not them, I was thinking maybe a Tyrell. Arya as well. It's a pity she is not as pretty as Sansa, but she can easily tie herself to houses like Redwyne, Hightower, Royce, Bracken, Blackwood or Martell. Brandon too, as a second son, could still go for those houses. She replied, almost giddy, thinking about their children's futures. He looked at his wife in shock. He expected it for Sansa, but Arya, let alone young Bran, that was too much. What about the North? He replied coldly, looking at her with his piercing grey eyes. What about it? She asked, surprised. Who will marry into the noble houses of the North? He explained. Oh, well, I hadn't thought about that. Well, I suppose Brandon could marry a Mandaeli if there will be a younger daughter or something. She said sheepishly, averting her eyes from his. That will not do, Cat. I have a duty to my bannermen and to the North. How can I keep the North together, if I give off the impression its nobles aren't even good enough for my children? He exclaimed, both the anger and disappointment clearly visible across his face. Well, because they aren't, not for Sansa or Robb anyway. They will be the most sought-after bride and groom north of the Mandaya. She said evenly, with fire in her bright blue eyes, as if daring him to contradict her on how special their children were. If Ned hadn't known any better, he would have thought his eyes would pop out of their sockets. So was his reaction to what his wife exclaimed. How can you even say such things? If my bannerman would be here right now, we would face a rebellion in the same fortnight alone. He gasped out. She looked at him weirdly. Ned, come on, you can't honestly try to put a Karstark or an Umber, who have nothing to offer but woods and snowed-out farms, on the degree of a Lannister or Tyrell marriage, let alone a royal one. Your bannermen are good, honest and loyal men, and I like them very much, but they could never be good enough for our two eldest children, she tried to explain frustratingly, as if he was the one not getting the simplest of things. Cat, after all these years, do you think so low of us? Mine own grandmothers were a lock and a flint of the mountains, whose houses are a lot less profitable to marry into than houses Umber or Karstark would be. You can't honestly think it acceptable to have these kinds of thoughts. Umbers and Carstarks have stood by our house for thousands of years while the Southron houses squabbled amongst each other. I say let them squabble and marry each other out of pride while we rule and marry in the North in peace. I have seen enough of the South in my lifetime. You can't mean that, Ned. You would throw away our children's potential. After all the work we put into our marriage, you would throw the product of it, our children, away. You would rather see them married to a clansman than to a Tyrell of the Reach. She almost yelled at him. Are you asking me if I would rather see my child married to a true man or woman of the North, who I know and can get the measure of, instead of some stranger of a house grasping for power thousands of miles away from here with no possibility for me to protect or see them? Then yes, Cat, I would. He responded bluntly. In his mind he was thinking about one of his daughters being stuck in a loveless marriage with a pompous southern lordling, while he could do nothing as he sat in Winterfell thousands of miles away. Before she could respond he continued more pragmatically, it is clear to me the northern vassals would need one of their own as Lady of Winterfell to placate them and keep the north as stable as it has been. As such I will only be considering northern betrothals for Robb when the time comes. You are more than welcome to bring any proposals to me, and I will discuss any offer with you as long as they are northern and that is final. He said with a finality in his tone that showed clearly that he did not wish to be questioned on this. Catelyn looked at him with a mixture of looks on her face, going from surprised over horrified to settling on angry. She knew better than to contradict him when he was in this mood however, and only said as you wish, Lord Husband. Seeing that, he felt his features soften. Cat, I only want what's best for our children and the North. Highgarden or Casterly Rock would bring nothing to either benefit except prestige. You can't eat prestige or warm yourself with it in winter, it is folly. However, I will admit to some of your requests. It is paramount that my heir marries a northern bride to keep things how they should be, and I will not move on it. However, Sansa, if she would like the South, is open for discussion. He said as he looked up at her. Seeing some of the anger disappear and flickers of hope starting to replace it, he continued. Besides that, it wouldn't be the first time a second-born Stark was fostered in the South either, so maybe Bran could foster with your father or brother when the time comes. If he is interested in such a damn knighthood, he could even squire for your uncle. Does that sound agreeable to you? He saw the hope flicker back more strongly into her eyes at the last sentences before her anger completely evaporated. I understand, Ned, I would like it to be different, but you have a duty to the North, I get it. Just promise me I can have a say in which girl we choose for him. He smiled sadly at her. Of course you will, Cat, I wouldn't dare to do it any other way. She just needs to be northern to keep the kingdom together as tightly as it has always been. And you promise that Sansa will get a high southern marriage? She asked suspiciously. I promise that I will consider every marriage prospect for Sansa from the Wall to Dawn, and that I will not keep her north if there is a better choice of action. He said honestly. Even so, from now on she will be educated in both southern and northern customs so she may have the opportunity to marry into both. He added warningly. And Brandon, she whispered. I promise Bran may go to Riverrun if your father accepts. However, he will not leave before the age of 7 or 8. He needs to know that Winterfell is his home a little while longer. He promised. Content, she let out a gasp of air. She stood up and walked over to his desk and laid her head on his shoulder. He couldn't say how long they stood there for, only that he felt tired and happy that she wasn't going to stay angry with him. After a while she whispered in his ear. He smiled and responded. If she keeps behaving like she does now, I doubt any southern lordling would want her anyway. He smiled, thinking about his young daughter. He contemplated if she would be playing with sticks in the Godswood right now or if she would be running around the kitchen or smithy dressed as nothing more than a servant boy. Ah, some things never change. He thought with a sense of melancholy, thinking about another willful Stark girl running through Winterfell's halls. Chapter 4, Going Fostering. 293 AC. Eddard. He looked over the letter for the last time, contemplating if this was the best thing to do for Robb and the North. He found no reason to waylay all the countless talks with Lewyn, Cat and even some with Roderick Castle and Veon Poole. He closed up the letter and walked over the Maester's turret. Lewyn noticed him immediately when he entered and smiled knowingly to him. I expect you want me to send the raven, my lord. Yes, Lewin, it's time. He nodded seriously. The raven will be gone within the hour, my lord. Lewin nodded supportingly. Thank you, he said, as he walked out and started descending the stairs of the mayor's turret. Already new thoughts had enveloped his mind. He needed to talk to Rob. There is a time jump here of around 4 months, we're nearing the end of 293 AC now. From now on new POVs will also start to be introduced, this is the first non-Ned POV. Rob. When his father had told him about the fostering, he hadn't known what to feel. On one side he had been excited to make new friends and learn more about the North and their bannermen, on the other he had been sad to leave Winterfell and his family. He was also, although he would never admit that to anyone, a little scared of how it would be there. All he could do now was curse his horse and the ride for all the blisters on his legs and bottom, as he had been in the saddle for just over 3 weeks. Father had given him a small horse soon after the news of his fostering, to learn to ride instead of his pony. He had been so excited, and he could kick his old self now because of it. If he had known what a nightmare it would be to ride 3 weeks in rain, snow and cold, he wouldn't have been so happy with the horse. Muttering to himself how he hated horses and these damn woods for the 1,000th time this week, he heard his father laugh loudly beside him. "Oh Rob, I really hope you'll never have to experience a war in your time. In contrast to most stories, most of it is just sitting a horse going somewhere or waiting in camp to figure out where to go next." He looked surprised at his father, he never talked about the war too much. Besides, that couldn't be true, right? All the great stories never mentioned anything like that. However, when he started to picture the map of Westeros and what he knew already of the rebellion, he wasn't so sure anymore. How else did his father go from the Eyrie to Winterfell, to the Riverlands, then King's Landing, Storm's End and back? He quickly told himself to pray to the Heart Tree when he arrived, to never be involved in a war. His us wouldn't survive a war, he solemnly thought. Seeing his somber expression, his father tried to cheer him up. Cheer up Rob, we're almost there. It's only a few hours from here to Carhold anymore and you'll be far too busy those first days to think about sitting a horse. Besides, in a couple of years you'll be racing around these woods with the Karstark boys anyway, don't fret yourself too much now. That did make him feel a bit better. The idea of being able to finally get off his horse in a while would have been enough to lighten the mood, but the prospect of meeting a lot of boys near his age to have fun with excited him even more. "How many Karstark boys are there again, father?" he asked excitingly. "Well, Lord Rickard has 3 sons close to your age and a daughter as well. Besides that, he has numerous cousins who all have boys your age or a few years older. You won't have a lack for company, that's for sure. You know, that's one of the reasons we chose the Karstarks. I know full well fostering is about alliances and creating bonds, and the Karstarks will definitely provide that, but I wanted you to enjoy it as much as you could as well. I can promise you, you won't be lacking fun or adventure at the Karstarks, my boy," his father said as he smiled down upon him from his horse. He smiled back, happy knowing that his father wasn't just sending him to some dull lord for strategical reasons. Knowing his father had made a lot of effort for him to enjoy these years did a lot to calm his nerves. Father had never let him down when he promised something, he wouldn't start now. He continued to talk to his father about the details of Karstark history, the lay of the lands and its family's strengths, until someone shouted. "Banners arriving fast from the northeast, my lord, a white sun on a black field." "Ah, it looks like Lord Rickard sent us a welcoming party, good," his father said to no one in particular, before turning towards him. "Are you ready to meet your new foster family son?" He nodded dutifully, and before more could be said he saw a group of around 15 men all dressed in black and white arrive on horseback. At the front, 2 bearded men stood out with 4 boys behind them. The boys were definitely Karstark kin, as could be seen at the similar features they all shared with the 2 older men. Rickard, good to see you again," his father said joyously to the eldest man at the front as he dismounted. "Great to see you as well, Ned. We can't thank you enough for the honor you bestow upon us," the other man boomed while embracing his father. "Let me present you to some of my family," the man continued. "This here is my cousin Cregan, you might remember him from the Trident, fought like a man possessed down there." The man, Lord Ricard Carstark, he assumed, said of the other man beside him. And these are my 3 sons, Harion, my heir, and Eddard and Torren. Standing beside them is Alaric, Cregan's youngest. It's a pleasure to meet your family and so many strong northern men in the making, Ricard. May I present you all, my son and heir Robb Stark. His father said with a hint of pride in his voice. He stood as tall and proud as he could next to his father after hearing him being described, while speaking up. It's an honor to meet you, my lords. I thank you for the great opportunity to let me foster here with you. I look forward to getting to know my distant kin, their home and the north better. He saw the men and older boys scrutinize him for a moment before Lord Ricard smiled at him. A good healthy boy, Ned, and polite as well. He will make a great lord of the north if he wants to, and we'll make a great northern warrior out of him here as well. Thank you, my lord. I look forward to it, he replied, as he beamed with pride. Lord Ricard gave him a nod before saying to everyone, "Come, we'll be on our way. My Alis is waiting for her father and brothers to come home with the Starks of Winterfell." After which his men and kin started laughing. As it died down and everyone was in the saddle again, Lord Ricard turned to his father. "Ned, if you would like to join me and Cregan at the front. We have a lot to discuss, better get it over with now." His father nodded to Lord Ricard before turning to him. "Robb, you go join the 4 Carstark boys and get to know them, we'll talk more at Carhold." Before he could answer, his father turned his horse and trotted over to Lord Ricard at the front as they continued their march. He steered his horse over to the boys in question. He saw the eldest boy, Harion, he thought, slow down to ride beside him. "Nice to meet you, I'm Harion Carstark, the heir to Carhold. It's very nice to see you in a different context than those harvest festivals at Winterfell." He smiled as he remembered a bunch of brown-haired boys in black causing mischief across Winterfell a few years back. "I'm Robb Stark, the heir to Winterfell, nice to meet you too. Doesn't look too much like a Stark now, does he? He's all red." Another boy exclaimed from in front of Harion. "Shut up, Torren, show the lad some respect. He's to be our liege lord someday, you bloody idiot." Harion responded harshly before turning towards Robb. "Excuse my little brother, my lord. He means well, but he never thinks before he says anything." Robb found the exchange quite amusing, especially with Torren in the background now muttering how he was not an idiot. He calmly responded. "Think nothing of it, Harion, and please call me Robb," he said to the elder boy, who nodded to him in thanks, before turning to Torren. "I might be all in red in coloring, but that doesn't come close to how red your blushing face gets when your brother starts scolding you." He saw the boy's mouth go wide open although no sound came out, while he heard the other 3 boys snicker. "Oh man, someone who can finally get Tot to shut up for a few seconds. You should have come here a lot sooner, Stark." One of the other 2 boys snapped happily while sarcastically emphasizing the other boy's apparent nickname. After the laughs died down, all of the boys introduced themselves. The 4th boy was apparently Alaric Carstark, son of Cregan. The latter also seemed to be Carhold's master-at-arms, so he made a mental note to not get on the father's bad side. All 4 of them seemed like a jovial bunch. Harion made him think a bit about Jon as he was also quite stern and serious, although much less solemn. Eddard, apparently named after his father, was quite funny and good-hearted and seemed to be very tight with his younger brother. Torren made him think a lot about Theon, although he was a lot less cocky. The latter he appreciated a lot, as that was what annoyed him with Theon sometimes. At last Alaric, he seemed to be shy at first, standing in the shadow of his mainline cousins. Although at better notice, he rode his horse with pride and started mingling himself more and more in the conversation the closer they got to Carhold, so maybe he wasn't that shy after all. All in all, that last hour of riding was a lot more fun than he had imagined whilst talking to his father. When they finally came to a clearing in the woods, he saw a wide deep river flowing through the landscape with a large village hugging the shoreline at both sides in front of him. At the back of the village, on the top of a hill stood Carhold. Although obviously smaller in size than Winterfell, it could not be called small by any means. The castle was made of dark grey and black stone and looked formidable. The gate was made of a dark sort of wood and stood wide open. It was flanked by 2 sturdy towers about 35 feet in height. Behind the gate you could see the great tower of the keep towering above the forests. On top of many of the towers he could see banners and flags with the crest of House Carstark emblazoned on it. Flying high above it on the great keep, he could see a great flag with the same crest. Flanked beside that one was another flag, equal in measure, with the direwolf of his house flying proudly in the wind. The sight, so far from home, made him feel more at home immediately. It also made him appreciate the fact of how big the north actually was. He had traveled more than 3 weeks on horseback, and this was still more than clearly Stark land. His father was responsible for the lives and prosperity here, just as he was for those in Wintertown. A strange sense of pride in his father swelled up in his chest as he glanced at him at the front of the column, sitting proudly on his black courser. Before he could dig deeper into that feeling, however, they were entering the castle's gate. After riding through it they came upon a big courtyard, about the same size as the one in Winterfell. In front of him he saw a group of people awaiting them. In the front stood a pretty young girl with a long face and brown hair that flowed gently down her back. Next to her stood a grumpy old man with grey hair and a big wild beard. Behind the elder man stood 2 more with the brown hair and brown beard he understood were common in the Carstarks. They were flanked by 3 boys, also sporting the Carstark colouring. Seeing him look, Torrhen nudged him toward the elder man. "That's Uncle Arnulf, he's the Castellan of Carhold. He's Cregan's father," Torrhen explained. "Behind him are his other son Arthur and most of Arnulf's remaining grandsons." "Oh, thank you, I was wondering about that. Who's the girl?" he said while nodding at Torrhen. "That, my friend, is our lovely little sister Alis." Eddard beamed from his other side with a smile so big he swore you could walk a pony straight through. Before he could say more, they were introduced to the remaining Carstarks and welcomed to Carhold. The grandsons were apparently called Bern, Bennett, Osric and Hodder, although the last one wasn't a Carstark but a Lightfoot. Harryon explained that the Lightfoots were a masterly house, sworn to the Carstarks, and that his father's cousin Lysara had married into them. Her son Hodder had been sent here to foster a few years back and came of age 3 months ago. Harryon said his father had given him a job in the household to please Uncle Arnold and the Lightfoots, which was why he was still here. "Alis, will you help your brother Harryon lead the young Stark here around the place and show him his quarters? Eddard and Torrhen go join with Alaric and Osric in the training yard. You have gotten more than enough time off already today." He heard Lord Ricard shout above the noise of the horses being taken to the stables. After hearing a chorus of "Aye, father," he was on his way around the keep. They showed him the whole keep, starting with his room. It was, although smaller than his room in Winterfell, still spacious. Harryon told him that it was the largest room in the family wing that they had left, and that his father had cursed how big their family was because he thought Robb, or his father, would be offended. After his room followed the rest of the keep, from the Carstark's own rooms to the kitchens. After leaving the keep, they showed him the bell tower and armory. When they finally entered the Maester's tower, he was introduced to Maester Robin. The Maester was a tall, slightly overweight man in his 40s and seemed friendly enough. He told him he would be getting his lessons with Eddard and Torrhen as Harryon's lessons were far too advanced for him to join for now. After seeing the kennels and the stables they went to see the Carstark crypt, styled after the one from Winterfell. It was there it hit him that, although smaller and in different stone, it seemed Carhold was loosely based on Winterfell, if you didn't count the new Great Keep. As he thought about it, that was quite logical, with Carlon Stark being from Winterfell, probably before the Great Keep was ever built. That thought made him smile, as he wouldn't need to be so worried about finding his way for the first few weeks now. After that they reached the Godswood. His father had told him profoundly on the trip how it would be important for him to be seen praying to the old gods in the beginning to eliminate any thoughts on him being too Southron or something like that. How he could be perceived as a Southron he didn't understand, but it never was a bad thing to pray more to the gods, he guessed. As he thought about this, he asked Harryon and Alis to lead him to the Weirwood tree and quickly thanked the gods for their safe travels and asked them to keep his family safe while he was here. Just before he stood up, he remembered his promise from before and also asked them to not send him into a war anytime soon. As he stood up from his prayers, he saw Alis and Harryon smile at him, and then they continued on their way. He learned from Alis that their mother had died just a few years after her birth, and she said, while giggling, she was technically the Lady of Carhold. After that, he kept jokingly calling her Lady Carstark, which she didn't like at all. At last, after a good 2 hours, they reached the courtyard. There he saw Eddard, Torren and 2 of their cousins drenched in sweat as they were all hacking at practice dummies. Before being able to join them, he was called by the Master-at-Arms Cregan. He told him that his father and Lord Ricard were waiting on him in the latter's solar. As Harry-on would be joining the other Carstarks in the training yard, Alis brought him there alone and they chatted a lot. He asked her about her family and their lands and people, and she asked him about Winterfell and his siblings. Finding her very smart and easy to talk to, he thought they would become easy friends. As they rounded the corner to come up to the solar, he saw how a guard in Carstark livery recognized them and immediately made it known to the people inside the solar. As they arrived, the guard told him, "Lord Stark and Lord Ricard are expecting you, young lord. They ask you immediately enter." Afterwards, he turned to Alis. "Your father thanks you, my lady. He asks me to tell you to resume your lessons." Before he entered the solar, he nodded smilingly at Alis and saw her smiling back at him. Inside he saw a large desk made out of light brown oak. He saw his father sitting on one side, with Lord Ricard flanked by his uncle Arnulf, the Castellan as he remembered, sitting at the other side. He dutifully walked over towards his father and stood behind his right shoulder. His father smiled at him and pulled out a chair for him to sit at. "Rob, we're going to finalize the fostering and I want you to know and agree to the general outline from it. You will stay here from now until you come of age at the age of 16. You will be allowed to go home once a year to accompany Lord Carstark to the Harvest Festival or if special circumstances arise." His father said, looking down to him, as he nodded. That was nothing new, as his father had told him this on the march already. Besides that, Lord Carstark promises you full unrestricted access to both the rookery and the library, so you may send home any letters you want. He continued as he looked sternly over to Lord Carstark, who nodded calmly. His father turned to him with the same stern face. "I expect you to write a weekly update on how your health, life and education is going, young man. Also write something for your mother in it, she will be more than worried enough without hearing something from you for months." Seeing him nod dutifully, his father continued on. "Last but not least, as the heir to the north, you will be assigned 2 guards here to keep an eye out for you. If everything is as it should be, they will leave for Winterfell at the turn of the year. I will assign Cain and Alyn to the task if that's all right with you." He looked surprisingly at his father. As far as he knew, wards didn't bring guards of their own. Maybe his father had used his rank to push an extra safety measure through. Seeing his father looking questioningly at him, he remembered what he had asked him and quickly responded. "Of course father, they are good and loyal men." Nodding, his father turned to the other men. While Lord Ricard looked moderately pleased, Arnulf Carstark looked far less amused, but he seemed resigned to the decision. "Well then, my lords, I suppose a toast to the continued friendship between houses Stark and Carstark is in order," his father said smilingly, while raising his glass of fire wine. "I." Both Carstark men said as they slammed their glasses against his father's, before downing them in one go. Chapter 5, An Unexpected Proposal. 294 AC. Rob. He had been at Carhold for over 6 months now, he thought when he woke up. Cain and Alyn had long gone back to Winterfell, so he was truly alone in Carhold now. Well alone, he had Harry-on, Eddard, Torren, Alis, Alaric and Osric to keep him company all the time. He missed his family, mostly his parents and John, but he was having a good time here. Just like his father had promised, he mused with a slight smile. As he got out of bed and dressed himself, he immediately ran to Torren's room. There he knocked on the door, like he did every morning. "Get up, sleepyhead. Otherwise we won't be able to spar before breakfast," he called loudly. At his words it was Eddard, not Torren, who entered the hallway from his adjoining room to Torren. Can you keep it down, man? Some people here don't wake up with sunshine coming out of their ass every day," he snapped half-heartedly to Rob. Rob smiled and gave him a little wink, at which Eddard burst out in laughing. "Come little brother, we do need to go now," he said while bargaining into Torren's room. As Rob peeped around the corner, he saw Torren putting on his boots. He quickly pulled his head back, knowing what was to come. However, he was too late. Torren had still seen him. Don't you go peeping into my room, Redstock, it's bad enough you wake me every morning. Rob smiled at the nickname. Torrin had started calling him that after their first meeting. While most of his family had either been shocked or outright angry with Torrin at first, he never minded. It always made him think on how he had put Torrin in his place that day. He smirked. Besides, he quite liked the nickname. If he had been a second son, he might have taken it as the name for a cadet branch. However now, it would just remain a nickname altogether. If you don't want me looking, then get your ass out of there in time, Karstark. I don't have all morning to beat you in the training yard. He retorted finally. At the last words, Torrin finally barged outside of his room. With Eddard joining in with them, they kept up their banter all the time until the training yard. The castle servants, used to being woken up by the loud youth's theatrics by now, smiled on as they passed. After their morning routine of an hour and a half was done, they joined the rest of the Karstark family in breaking their fasts. As he talked joyfully with Alis, Torrin and Eddard, it was quite a pleasant morning. At some Lord Ricard addressed him and asked him after his training and lessons. Content with his replies, he continued by asking him if he had written his weekly letter yet. Looking sheepishly at Lord Ricard, he tried finding an excuse to justify his forgetfulness. The stern lord would have none of it, however. Keep your excuses to yourself, boy. After your lessons this morning you will write that letter and I will ask the maester myself tonight if it was sent or not. Do you hear me? I never broke any promise that I made to my liege lord in my life, and I'm not starting now because of your laziness. He added threateningly. Rob gulped and nodded, silently cursing his father's insistence on the letters. Apparently being satisfied with that response, Lord Ricard turned to Harry on and the meal continued on its merry way. He went to his lessons with Maester Robin, together with Torrin, Eddard and Osric. They were in a series of handling the history of the North's most powerful houses. After already speaking about houses Stark, Karstark and Umber, they would talk about the Bolton history today. He enjoyed the hours talking about the Red Kings, however his mood slightly darkened at the stories of a few of his kinsmen being flayed and some of their skin being worn around as coats. He was also surprised to hear they had managed to burn down Winterfell, twice. His mood seriously darkened at the mention of rumors of a secret flaying dungeon, hidden somewhere in the Dread Fort. It was there the rumors mentioned that the Boltons have continued their practice of flaying all these centuries. He promised that when he became lord, he would keep an eye out on House Bolton. They had sworn to House Stark to stop the practice of flaying over 1,000 years ago. If they still did it now, that would mean they had betrayed his house for countless generations on end. If they did so, he would crush them, he thought heroically, just like his forefathers had always done. After his lessons he went to his room. He took out his quill and some paper to write the letter he needed to send to his father. Staring at the blank page thinking about what to write, he finally put his quill to the paper. Dear Father. Eddard. It was late in the morning and he was sitting at his desk. Lewin had already brought him all the Raven scrolls and messages who had arrived, and he started looking through them. As he looked at the pile of paper, he saw another foster offer for Sangza. He had already received offers from houses Marndale, Blackwood, Mormont and Umber, and even some bold betrothal proposals from houses Hornwood and Flint. This time, however, it was from a much more surprising source. He looked at the letter from Lady Dustin with a frown. She invited Sangza to go to Barrowtown to become her cupbearer and ward. She promised to teach her all the womanly arts, as well as teach her what it really meant to be a northern woman, as she doubted the Trout could teach her such things. Not knowing what to do with the message, he took several moments to ponder about it before putting it on the pile. He would think about it later and talk with Lewin and Kat about it. He looked at the other letters, some rapports he had asked for, about his personal lands around Winterfell. Others were messages to keep him up to date on how the general agriculture and livestock were doing in the north. He looked at the figures and was pleased. They would be ready for winter when it came. He had another message from Lord Sewin on the small repairs on the King's Road, as his men would finally start next week. They would go from Castle Sewin right up to the gates of Winterfell, having already mapped out all places that needed some work. He thought about the repairs. It would have been a lot better if they could do the whole King's Road from Castle Black all the way down through the neck. Especially its northern parts, as they weren't in the best condition. He didn't have all the coin needed to make those repairs though. The repairs together with House Selwyn were small ones in comparison, but he still took on about 2/3 of the financial burden. Nothing Winterfell's finances couldn't handle, and the small economic boost it would create was worth it, but no way he could pay like that for the 1,000 miles of King's Road. He suddenly got an idea, however: increasing the King's Road would improve the infrastructure of the kingdom. That would make it easier for southern merchants to trade north, as well as make it easier for him to go south with an army if Robert needed him. He took a quill and paper and started writing a message to King's Landing to ask for financial aid to the betterment of the kingdom. He also made it clear that it would make the Seven Kingdoms as a whole more united. Happy with the result, he put it to the side to give to Lewin later on. The last letter on the pile was a letter from Robb. Eager to learn how his son was doing, he opened the parchment. "Dear father, I am very good here. The food is good, and I remain staunch friends with Torren, Eddard, Alis, Harryon and Alaric. I am progressing well with the sword, Cregan tells me. I train around 3 to 4 hours a day with it now, but it is really fun with all the Karstark boys. I am learning about the histories of the North's great houses this week and have already gotten lessons about houses Stark, Karstark, Umber and Bolton. Do we know for certain House Bolton doesn't still flay people? Roose Bolton to me seems capable of it at least, and I heard rumors persist to this day. Tell Arya and Bran that I love and miss them and that I will soon be home for the harvest feast. Tell Jon the same, but add that I don't want him to be so grumpy all the time. Maybe you could foster him too, so he won't be so alone." I added another small letter for Mother, as promised. "Your loyal son and heir, Robb Stark." He smiled, happy at the fact that his son was happy and had made friends, who would besides be very great allies in his future. His remarks on the Bolton family he dismissed easily as childish rumors. Yes, Roose Bolton could easily be capable of doing it, but he would never risk his house's position like that. What made him think more, however, was his remark on Jon. He was very touched with Robb's dedication to Jon, but maybe he also had a point. Jon had not been entirely happy even when Robb was here. Now sometimes when he looked at the boy, he seemed beyond miserable. As Robb was having a great time in his fostering, Jon could too. This fostering was maybe even more difficult though. No way he would ever let him go south, if only for their notion of bastards. He would need to send him to some lord from the north that could better his position and teach him things that would help him in his future, while ensuring that it could not be seen as a slight for sending them a bastard. There was also the thing of Jon getting more influence than his brother, but he dismissed that immediately. Jon would never do anything against Robb, only Catelyn would ever think that. Who could it be? Umber or Mormont would do it, he assumed. They would give him a good education and make a man out of him. He would decide later. First he needed to deliver Robb's message to Cat. After he delivered Cat the news and the message of their firstborn, he asked her about Sansa and Arya. She said their lessons with Septa Mordane were about the same. Sansa excelled at them and little Arya didn't like them at all. However, when it came to the new northern parts of their education, Catelyn hesitated. "The Maester is giving them basic history lessons and I try to teach them about some of the customs of northern houses, but I don't know if it's doing any good," she said, the doubt clearly in her voice. "Cat, I know you're trying your best, but maybe we should hire someone to teach them about those things, as we have Septa Mordane to teach them about the south," he said calmly, not wanting to start another argument about the topic. "Who? I won't let my daughters be educated by some old hag from the Wolf's Wood," she responded decisively. "What about a noblewoman?" he said, thinking about a conversation he had, almost a year ago. "What about it?" she reacted, surprised. "Would you object to us hiring a northern noblewoman to teach them about the north, as well as keep them in line with the womanly ways? I know the Maester wasn't able to help with that and you have your hands full with the household anyway," he asked. "Well, a refined northern lady could be an option, but..." She hesitated if she would continue, biting her lip. "I'm not talking about the Mormonts, Cat. I'm talking about Joan Elsewin. Her father suggested it to me almost a year ago. She's a refined lady, and still a maid. She's a plump and homely woman and could easily teach both of them about running a household, as well as sewing and needlework and the like. Mija even hinted that she could help with Arya's more unrefined edge and bring her in line. I don't think anyone can bring Arya in line, ever. His wife sighed. She's only 5 and already she behaves more like a stable boy than a lady. Well, it couldn't hurt, could it? I mean, this would free some of your time, as Septum Ordain and Jonel could each take half of their education in hand. We would just need to check if everything is in order from time to time. Besides, if she isn't what I'm expecting, we can always send her away," he said, finding it more and more a good idea. His wife looked at him pensively, before asking, "You really won't let this northern education thing go, won't you?" "No, Cat, this must happen, we've talked about it. I want them to be easily able to marry in both the north and the south," he answered. "Well then, I guess we should invite Joan Elsewin here, as I can't do this. I barely know what I'm doing whilst trying to organize the household at the same time. The Maester is just drilling lessons of the north in them, while they could be handy in conversation, they teach them nothing on how to behave as a northern lady." She sighed in defeat, before going on, with a lot of venom in her voice. "But before I let her anywhere alone with my daughters, I will hear her out and watch her with them. If she is uncouth or incapable, I will send her straight back to her father." "Of course, Cat." He smiled. "Maybe we could sit in on their first lessons together, to see how she does with our daughters." Cat looked appreciatively at him and nodded. Gods, he hoped Joan Elsewin was capable, so they could leave this topic of months of arguing behind them. He kissed her goodbye after some more small talk and headed to his solar. There he was met with Sir Wendell Marndaly. The fat knight of White Harbour had arrived 2 days prior to give a rapport to him about trade in White Harbour and was now enjoying his house's hospitality. "Sir Wendell, what brings you here?" he asked, trying to figure out what he wanted. "I would like to discuss something in private with you, my lord. If that would be possible," the younger son of Lord Wiman asked. "Of course, Sir Wendell, come," he said as he entered his solar. He pointed the large man to a seat and sat down, waiting for him to explain why he was here. "May I speak openly, my lord?" he asked bluntly. "Of course, Sir Wendell. What is this about?" he asked, surprised at the bluntness in the man's voice. "My father tasked me to keep an eye out on your daughter Sansa's situation and if possible, to ask for a fostering to accompany my nieces Winifred and Wyler. However, it has become clear over the last 2 days that you and Lady Caitlin do not want to make such a decision yet, am I right?" the Marndaly knight asked questioningly. Not surprised that this was about Sansa, he nodded wearily. "As such, I don't see any reason in continuing down that road for now. I have a personal favor of you to ask, coming only from me and not my father," Sir Wendell continued. Now he was surprised, not thinking the Marndalys would give up on Sansa so easily. He leaned forward and said, "What would that favor entail, Sir Wendell?" "It's about your son John, my lord," the knight said, while rubbing his moustache. "John? What do you want with John?" he said suspiciously, narrowing his eyes at the knight. "Well, for the last 2 days I have been here, I noticed that the boy is completely miserable. He clearly misses your other boy Rob and is quite lost because of it. He is also clearly wary of you lady wife and he tries to make himself as invisible as he can, to not draw her ire," the man continued. "While that is mostly true, I have been looking for a solution for John. I however, fail to understand what this has to do with you, sir," he said, annoyed that the knight had pointed out his failures in John's education. "Well my lord, I am here because I have a possible solution. When I leave here, I want to take young John with me as my personal page and in time as my squire," the bald Marndaly stated. "John? As your page and squire? Why?" he asked perplexed. "He is my liege lord's son, my lord. I am in need of a page with all the travelling I do for my father and would like to have a squire in time for future tourneys. I also think that I could help John to enjoy life a little, maybe even make him a knight to better his future," the man explained. He stared at the Marndaly knight for a long time before asking, "The fact he isn't trueborn doesn't bother you?" "Well my lord, there is no point denying in what he is, but he is also the son of the Stark of Winterfell. That means a lot, trueborn or not. I myself, am only the second son of a lord and it wouldn't be that much of a scandal to have the bastard of my liege squire for me because of it. My honor commands me to ask this of you, my lord, as I would see no child of Winterfell this unhappy and aimless in my lifetime. We Marndalis, O House Stark, a life debt for what you did for us when we came north. I want to do my part of it now. The bald man responded. Touched by the man's loyalty, he started to think it over. Finally, he asked. What would you expect his duties to be, and where would you go with him? Most journeys would be routine trade missions for my father, my lord, going to either Bravos, Pentos, Myr or Gulltown. He might also need to accompany me on trips to my father's bannermen and the southeastern lords of the north. His duties would be the normal duties of a page: serve me wine, clean my clothes and run my messages, that sort of things. Later on, as a squire, he would also need to help with my horse and armor. The knight explained the duties. In turn, I will teach him how to fight, ride and hunt, how to deal with trade, negotiations, ships and how to balance the books. I humbly think it would be a better future than most for the boy. He would be taught a lot of skills, see some of the world and maybe even earn a knighthood in time. The man continued. Instinctively he wanted to reject the Marndaeli knight and keep Jon close, however the proposal intrigued him. Being a knight, bastard or not, would give Jon the possibility to make a name for himself. In time he could earn a small keep for himself from him, or even stay as master-at-arms or captain of the guard of Winterfell. He thought about it. Didn't the Castles descend from some long-forgotten Stark bastard? It would be a much better future than the wall for him, and if he was a knight, Cat couldn't hold as much against him as she did now. Even if she did, he could still give him a small holdfast somewhere close to Winterfell in the Wolf's Wood. There would also be no knight he could trust more with Jon than this Marndaeli. The loyalty of the man sitting across him was overwhelming. He looked at Sir Wendell, who was patiently waiting for an answer. I would have to talk to Jon about it, see if he is interested, but I have conditions. He will need to be able to write home and to rob whenever he wants. He is also forced to send me a letter about his well-being and education every week. He'll also be allowed to go home for the harvest feast every year, to be with his family. That would of course be acceptable, my lord. However, I will not be able to make it each harvest feast. In such occasions he will be escorted home by men sworn to my house. He will also miss those trips I will partake in at the time of the harvest feast. The knight said happily. That won't be a problem, Sir Wendell. He can spare to miss those trips, if it is to see his family. He answered honestly. Splendid, then I will wait to see what young Jon thinks about it and hope to take him with me to White Harbor in a week or two. The man stood up, thanked him and left. Sitting there, he thought long and hard about Jon and what his mother would have wanted for him, also thinking about what he wanted for the boy. After what seemed like hours he finally stood up and went looking for Jon. After a while, he found the young boy sitting alone below the hearth tree. Hello Jon, he said calmly. Father? The boy asked, surprised. Yes Jon, we need to talk. He said as warmly and reassuringly as he could. It wasn't enough however, as the boy shrunk about an inch and looked fearfully at him. Did I do something wrong, my lord? I won't do it again, I promise. The boy exclaimed. Surprised and hurt at the boy's reaction, he immediately responded. No, no Jon. You did nothing wrong. I'm not here for that, I'm here to talk about your future. The boy's dark grey eye looked up at him with surprise. My future, father? My boy, I got a proposal for you today. I wanted to know what you thought about it. He said, and he continued by explaining Sir Wendell's proposal. As he was done the boy's eyes looked shocked, but there was also something else there, excitement maybe. He wants to take me as his page and squire, me a bastard. The boy whispered. No Jon, he wants to take you as his page and squire as a son of Winterfell. He corrected softly, while smiling gently down towards the boy. The boy looked at him in disbelief, looking at him if this was some terrible joke or not. So, what do you think about it? Would you want to go? He wants to take you with him when he leaves in a week or two. He asked the boy patiently. The boy, finally coming to grips with the fact that this was very serious, suddenly looked to him with hope in his eyes. Yes father, I would love to go. Can I? The boy almost yelled in excitement. You would not miss us, me and your siblings? He asked pensively. The boy looked positively ashamed. Of course, I would. I will miss you all and I will write a lot. However, I feel lonely without Rob here, father. I think it would be a really good thing for me if I go away and learn things, just like him. If I were a knight, I could serve Rob when I'm older and I would know what to do in my life. I could also advise Rob in trade and other things Sir Wendell teaches me. The boy told him. He looked down at the boy. John looked very serious and he didn't doubt a second he would be as loyal to his brother as he exclaimed. He also didn't doubt that this was what the boy had needed for months now, a purpose. At that point he made the decision. Yes, you can. I want you to talk it over with Sir Wendell first, but except for that I have no objections and I will let you go if you want. I will miss you, while you are away though. He said, looking at the boy with a sad smile as he put a hand on his shoulder. Thank you, father. The boy cried out while grabbing him in fierce hug. It had been a long time since he had embraced John. He should have done it sooner, he realized as he enjoyed the moment a little longer. Chapter 6, The Birth of a New Stark. 295 AC. Another time jump of about a year. Eddard. He felt tired, but so very happy. Caitlin had just given him another son. He was a beautiful boy, who just like Rob and Bran, favored his mother in looks. He had what he always wanted now, a big family. The Stark line was more secure than it had been in decades, a thing he knew that his father would be proud of. In respect of his father he had called the boy Rickon, a strong Stark name for a healthy and strong Stark boy. More than that, he was just very happy that both the boy and Caitlin lived. He didn't know what he would have done if he had lost Cat, like his father had lost mother. Having seen to the fact that Caitlin and newborn baby Rickon were both healthy and asleep, he finally walked over to his solar. Some things are more important than sleep, he thought. He took out 2 pieces of paper and started writing messages to Rob and John about the birth of their little brother. It was time for them to come home, so his whole family would be united. Around 1 month later. Eddard. He enjoyed breakfast with his whole family more than he could have ever hoped. They were all sitting at the head table in the great hall. All of the children were chatting happily and exchanging stories of their time apart, while Cat was fussing over baby Rickon. She was so busy she didn't even seem to mind John's presence there. Maybe it was something else as well. He had noticed how John's departure from Winterfell and her assurance that only 1 or 2 of his other vassals would meet him in his travels, had softened her more extreme edges. She mostly seemed to ignore him when he came to visit now. She probably thought that with his departure he had less ability to steal Winterfell from Rob, he thought with a sigh. Whatever it was, it seemed to work out for him well, as he had peace in his keep. More importantly, John really seemed to enjoy his time spent in White Harbor and beyond on Sir Wendell's travels. John had arrived around a week ago. He had received the Raven, just as he had arrived back to the north from a trip to Bravos with Sir Wendell. As the roads to White Harbor were on favorable terrain and in reasonably good condition, he had arrived in a fortnight on horseback. The same could not be said about Rob, as he had taken over a week extra to travel. Especially the start of his journey, through the woods of Carhold, the terrain was a lot less favorable. The fact that roads were a lot sparser and in worse condition that far north also played a part, he sadly thought. Thinking about roads, he thought about the progress he had made on that front for the north. He had written to John Arryn for the repairs on the King's Road. To his surprise, the finances of the crown weren't as good as he had expected, and thus, he hadn't been able to get any coin from his former foster father. He had, however, managed to get a tax reduction for the north of around 20,000 golden dragons a year, over a 3-year period. He had immediately started talks with Houses Sewin, Dustin and Reed after he had received the Raven. He had come to the conclusion that in total, with the tax reduction and contributions of House Stark and those respected vassals, they would have just enough to repair the King's Road. They would manage to repair it from the border with the Riverlands to Castle Sewin. In some places through the neck the road would even be enlarged, and the road from Moat Cailin to Barrowtown would also get minimal work. As all 4 houses would put their workers on the job, and with the works from Castle Sewin to Winterfell long finished, it would only take just over 2 years if summer held. Hearing of the news, House Marndale had also proposed repairs to the road from White Harbor to Moat Cailin. He sadly didn't have the coin for that, however, and had let them know. As such, it had come as a very big surprise, when John came home last week and told him of the new trade deal that House Marndale had managed to get with the Sea Lord of Bravos. The revenue the deal would make for House Stark directly through a small tax increase as well as the trade of their personal lumber from the Wolfswood made the works to the road feasible. House Marndale had known this, it seemed, as John also came with a new proposal of Lord Wyman. They even proposed to pay for half of the total costs of the repairs. John was very happy, when he had let him know yesterday, that he had sent a raven to Lord Wyman that he accepted the deal. Workers from White Harbour would be starting on the road within a month and they would be ready long before House Reed or Dustin would finish their works. He was very happy to see the north, or at least its southern parts, start to do so well. He and Lewin had already come up with several plans to do the same in the lands of Houses Umber, Carstark, Roswell and Locke as well as in parts of the Wolfswood. As bettering infrastructure to help trade was the only way for the North to make some extra coin, it seemed. He didn't have the gold to pay for it though, and thus the plans would not be put into action for now. Maybe in a few years, and if not, Rob can finish them later, he mused. It had also made him look at Moat Cailin. The lay of the roads showed him how important Moat Cailin was for the North. It was the first impression people from the south really got from it, as well as its first and best defense. He knew he could never restore the castle to its full glory in his lifetime, but there needed to be something he could do. If he and Cat got their way, it would be Bran's or Baby Rooken's seat in a decade, maybe two. It needed to be cleaned up and repaired in some way before that was even possible to happen. Father, you aren't even listening to Rob's story. Arya suddenly pouted from his left, as he was taken back to his family meal. As he looked around the table, everyone was staring at him, even Cat looked up at him with annoyance in her face. Oh, excuse me everyone. I was just musing over some work I have to go over with Lewin later. Please Rob, tell us all of what has happened in these months you have been away. He said as he smiled at his eldest son. The boy answered, no worries father, Lord Ricard showed me how much work being a lord brings. I can only image what you all need to do, as that was only for the Carstark lands, not the whole north. He looked to his son then, seeing the first signs of the dutiful man he would become. It seemed stern Lord Ricard was having a good effect on his son, for which he was glad. He added a nod in thanks to him, for his acceptance of the apology. Arya still looked cross at him, but she was soon enraptured in Rob's stories of Carhold. He told about his lessons first. How he learned about the lumber trade, the North's history and some of its long-forgotten customs. When he came to his sword-fighting lessons, he could see Bran and Arya hanging on his lips for every word. Even John cut in as he asked Rob for a spar later today, which the latter accepted with a smirk. The boy continued. I have been getting to know Carhold and its surrounding lands more and more. I have been making frequent trips with Torrin and Eddard throughout the woods. Harryon, Alis, Osric or Alaric often accompany us as well. Hodder made a trip with us too, once. Carhold's crypts are also very interesting. If you go back enough, you can find 8 Stark princesses from before the conquest and 4 Stark ladies from after laying there. All married into House Carstark and became the Lady of Carhold. I think Lord Ricard showed them to me to prove how closely related our houses still are. For the same reason I think, he also showed me a book with 27 ladies of House Carstark who married into all layers of House Stark. Kings, princes, lords, second sons, literally all of it happened apparently. The boy said good-naturedly. More to show you how a marriage between you and his Alis would be a good thing, if I know Ricard at all. He thought to himself, without interrupting his son's stories. Rob continued to talk about the time where Torrin and Osric had managed to put horse dung in their cousin Alaric's riding boots, without him noticing. Cat and Sansa looked to him with a scandalous expression on their faces. Arya and Brandon were crying from laughter however, as Rob continued to tell how Alaric had chased his younger cousins across the yard with the boots still on. After their breakfast, Sansa and Arya went with Jonel Sawin to their lessons. Jonel's lessons had been a blessing for both Cat and himself. While Cat had been positively surprised at how well she managed to get Arya to sew, he was mostly happy at how Sansa seemed to learn from the stories of great northern ladies Jonel told. Sansa seemed to start to realize that it was possible to be a lady, who sewed, sung and bore a lot of beautiful sons as well in the north as in the south. She still seemed to like songs about southern princes and knights more, but it was a start. A giddy Brandon went with Rob and John to the training yard, under the watchful eye of Sir Roderick Castle. Sir Roderick had also loved the arrival of Jonelle, as it made his nephew Jory finally want to settle down. After a lot of haggling with Lord Sewin, who seemed both happy Jonelle finally wanted to marry and said that it was only to a lower masterly house like the castles, Major had finally relented. He had needed to ensure him Jonelle would have a good life in Winterfell close to her family home and that the marriage would bring a lot of goodwill with House Stark. Although he secretly thought the fact he would need to pay a smaller dowry than expected also played a role. Whatever the case, Jarell and Jory were planned to marry in 2 weeks' time. It was planned as such so Rob and John could attend as well, to show Major what a big deal this was to House Stark. After Sir Roderick and the boys left, Cat gave baby Rickon to a wet nurse and joined him in his solar. They needed to have another talk about their children. Ravens to ask for a possible fostering for Sansa. Arya and Bran kept flying in over the year, as news of Rob and John's departure spread. Originally, he had wanted to keep Sansa and Arya here as Bran would leave, but the birth of baby Rickon in combination with some very interesting offers made that both unnecessary and unwise. He and Cat, with the help of Lewin, had narrowed the proposals for Sansa down to the four most beneficial for her development and the North. Houses Blackwood, Marndale, Dustin, and Royce were the surviving candidates. They had also received word from his father-in-law, but he had waited to open the letter until now so Cat could be there. They read through it together. Hoster seemed very happy about the possibility to foster Bran. That had been no surprise to either of them of course, as the man longed to see his grandchildren. He was much happier at the news. Hoster also reacted very positively on his remark that maybe Bran could be joined by some sons of his bannermen to ensure he had friends to play with. He had already gone as far as to extend invitations to foster Alyn Blackwood and Lyman D'Arry apparently. He read that both boys were born in the same year as his son and that he expected both their fathers to accept. "Oh, this is wonderful news, Ned," Catelyn called out as she turned towards him. "He will have friends his age from the Riverlands. That will make his fosterage both better for him and for our house," she said. "That's very true, Cat, this is wonderful news." He smiled at his wife. "It is also very interesting, the D'Arrys fought at the side of the Targaryens at the Trident. It seems your father wants to strengthen his hold on the Riverlands." He mused. "Yeah, you're right. Maybe Bran could restore the divides between our houses and bring the D'Arrys back into the fold again," she said, happy that the Riverlands would be doing well. "There is also the matter of the Blackwood boy. If Bran fosters with one of Tytos' sons, I don't see a benefit of sending Sansa there as well," he said as he looked questioningly to his wife. You're right, Ned," she said sadly. "It seems only of my children will go to my homeland for now." He took his wife in his arms as he consoled her, knowing she missed the Riverlands after all these years. "Bran will have a wonderful time there, my love, and who knows, maybe you and most of the family can visit him when he is settled in completely." He smiled at her. She smiled back at him. "I would love that, Ned, thank you," as she hugged him. After a while they broke apart and talked further about Sansa. "I also received word from Jon Arryn about Lord Royce," he said. "What does it say?" she asked, intrigued. "Well, it seems he takes on a lot of the duties in the Vale that Jon isn't able to perform from King's Landing lately. As such, he is traveling a lot. I don't know if it would be a good idea for Sansa to go there, if he isn't there to keep close watch on her education." "You might be right," she sighed. "But that means my daughter would be fostered in the North," she said sadly. "Yes, it does," he stated matter-of-factly. Seeing how she got upset, he quickly added. "It doesn't mean she has to marry in the North, however. Both Lady Dustin and Lord Marndale have no sons or grandsons her age, so no marriage would be expected." As she calmed down a little, she suddenly stated, "It must be Lady Dustin then." "How so?" he asked, surprised. "Well, if we send her to the Marndales, she will be there with your bastard. We cannot send her there when he is already. It would give of the impression she is no better than the bastard. Besides that, I don't want him to influence her in any way," she stated angrily. He felt the anger raging as he heard her words and started to angrily cut in. "Cat, I do not want you to speak about Jon in that way, and besides he is almost never there," and he suddenly stopped as he thought about the consequences of what she had said. She willingly wanted to send Sansa to Lady Dustin. This could help mend the rift he had with the only three powerful vassals he didn't have a great relationship with, the Dustins, her family of House Ryswell, and through her and her nephew the future of House Bolton. It would be an ideal situation for him. Sansa could charm her way up to Barbary and could help mend the schism that has been there between their houses for over a decade. It could also help him when he inevitably needed to handle the Dustin succession. Barbary, although only a Dustin by marriage, was allowed to rule those lands for life. When she passed, it would need to revert back to some very distant Dustin line. Without her cooperation to do this, however, the inheritance of the Barrowlands could become a real messy affair. Nothing he wanted for himself or his son to have to deal with. As he considered all these things really quickly, he suddenly looked up to his wife and said, "You're right, my love, it would be for the best if Sansa is sent to Barrowtown." She looked suspiciously at him. "What made you change your mind so quickly?" she demanded to know. "You're right that it might be a bad influence for her, it would also be best for the North. So, I will follow your thoughts on this," he stated diplomatically. He hated how she spoke about Jon, but he was safely away in White Harbor and this was an opportunity he could not let go to waste. She nodded contently. "Still, as she is sent to a northern lady, preparations need to be made so she doesn't forget her southern education," she said smoothly. He squinted his eyes. "What do you mean with that, Cat?" he asked her questioningly. "Oh, just that Septa Mordane will accompany her to Barrowtown for the duration of her stay," she stated easily. He was surprised to hear about this. "Really, Cat? What about the help she gives you, and what about Arya's education?" he asked, perplexed. "Arya barely listens to the Septa, Ned. I hate to admit it, but the only one who makes any basic progress with her is Jonelle. Although I don't like it, it might be best for Arya to let Jonelle take over her education completely," she said sadly, wanting both her daughters to be educated in her faith. "As for the help she gives me, that will be harder. However, nothing a combination of Septon Chale and some talented maids from the household can't fix over time, I think," she stated pragmatically. He looked at her deep in thought. It would indeed be better for Arya's development to have that women far away from her. The things she was trying to teach his youngest daughter infuriated him to no end, but he could do nothing without risking Cat's ire, which wasn't worth it to him. It would be a way to solve this, and apparently Cat, her work, wouldn't suffer under it too much. The only problem would be Lady Dustin, he thought somberly. "I don't think she will like to have a Southron holy woman in her court. I will try to discuss it with Lady Dustin, my love, but I can't promise anything." "You can, otherwise Sansa will not be going to her," Cat responded harshly. He sighed and looked at her. As he saw that reasoning with her would bring him absolutely nowhere, he just responded calmly. "I will make it clear to her that allowing Septa Mordane to go there is in her best interest." His wife nodded contently at him. "That's settled then. I just wanted to ask you about Arya now," he said, giving in on the subject of the Septa. "Arya? What about her? You don't plan to foster her somewhere in the north too, do you?" she asked, her eyes wide. No, Cat, Arya stays here. She will however be lonely, so I thought maybe we could ask for a few ladies to come here so she will have friends to play with. It would make the news of rejection for some of the houses we passed over a lot easier as well," he said hopefully, not wanting his daughter to feel alone here. He knew what feeling alone in Winterfell felt like, and he didn't wish it for his child. "That could be a good idea, Ned, but why do I get the feeling we will not agree on which ladies to send?" she asked suspiciously. "I think we will be able to strike a balance between different influences," he tried diplomatically. "Which influences?" she asked, while her eyes squinted together. "I think the youngest Mandaeally granddaughter would be a good idea, for starters," he tried. His wife nodded happily at that. She looked favorably on the house from White Harbor and hated the fact Jon was the one that could go there, he knew. Other daughters of Bannerman would also be a good idea, especially Lyanna Mormont and Alara Umber, he said, awaiting his wife's reaction. "You want one of the Mormont women here in Winterfell?" she exclaimed. "A mere child, she will hardly be a warrior in padded armor at the age of 5, Cat." He saw her looking it over. "And this Alara Umber?" she finally asked. The Great Yon's youngest daughter, she is about a year older than Arya, I think. It would endear the Great Yon to us and it might bring the Umbers to look more to the rest of the north, instead of only the Karstarks and the mountain clans. The young lady will probably like it here. He said honestly. That could be an option, yes. However, you said something about balancing influences, this doesn't seem balanced to me. His wife responded cleverly. Expecting this answer, he stated with a smile, well, I had thought Lord Royce's youngest daughter Rhea might be a good match too. Very well, his wife said, suddenly happy. The Royce girl would probably serve as the southern influence she had always wanted for Arya. It would be a good idea for Arya to have some ladies around her, to remember her of her station. You will take care of the correspondence. He nodded smilingly. Then I will have to go to the household now, there are things that need to be done. She said as she stood up, kissing him softly before she left to walk to the door. She suddenly halted and turned around with a hand on the grey iron door handle. What did you decide about Theon? She asked. I will ride to King's Landing. He said sadly. She looked at him for a while, nodded and left. Chapter 7, A Trout Comes North. 296 AC. Jon felt the cool breeze of the summer winds on his face, as he watched White Harbor coming closer on the horizon. He smiled as a small burst of salt water hit his cheek. He had accompanied Sir Wendell on a small trading mission to Sisterton. The Sunderlands were a noisy bunch. The Lord has 7 sons, but only 5 had been present as the others are being squired in the Vale. Thank the gods, 5 annoying brats who looked down on him for being a bastard were more than enough. He was happy to soon be back at White Harbor. Jon, don't just stand around there, help the first mate with the sails. Sir Wendell suddenly shouted. He looked onto the fat knight and nodded, before doing as he was told. Sir Wendell had insisted for him to help out the crew when he had time. He said it would help him to learn more about how ships worked than books ever could. It was hard work as the captains they had sailed with had eagerly made use of the free help he had to offer, but it was something to pass the time. Soon they docked in the harbour and were greeted by Sir Willis and Sir Marlon Marndaly. As the large Marndaly brothers embraced, Sir Marlon walked up to him. Lord Wyman wishes to speak to you, Jon. I'm afraid my cousin is very busy, so it can't wait until you have cleaned yourself up. Am I to go to court looking like this? He asked, surprised. He couldn't believe it. His clothes were stained from the seawater, a part of his tunic had been ripped while helping to dock the boat and his hair could fit a bird nest in it. No, that wouldn't do, the older knight chuckled. I am to escort you to the Lord's Solar. Oh well, better not let his lordship wait. Lead the way, sir. He gestured to the knight, before calling to Sir Wendell. Sir Wendell, your lord father has a need of me, so I will accompany Sir Marlon to his solar, if that's all right with you. The large knight nodded at him and smiled. He really liked Sir Wendell. The knight looked after him dutifully, but it was more than that. He went out of his way to teach Jon things. Actively got him involved in conversation if the possibility arose, and if not, he always explained his actions and what had happened after. At times, he acted more like a very helpful and supportive uncle than even his uncle Benjen had done for him when he visited Winterfell. When he was at White Harbor, he sometimes got him the possibility to learn from the maester or steward in private lessons. They also sparred every day together, sometimes his brother Sir Willis even joined in. Sir Wendell had secretly told him that he needed the sparring sessions as much as Jon. The knight's skill with the sword was far above his own, but he feared that he would otherwise become as fat as his father. More than anything, they actually liked each other. When they were alone, or at least without any nobility in the vicinity, they had long started to drop decorum. Jon even went so far as to call him Wen, although he knew that, due to his status, he could never do so in public. As they entered the merman's court, he passed countless statues of sea creature before they reached the Lord's Solar. The 2 guards standing before it nodded to Sir Marlon and they let them enter without a word. He saw Lord Wyman sitting at his desk going over some papers as he looked up and saw them. Ah, Jon, my boy, how was the trip to the sisters? Lord Marndaly asked jovially. Tedious, my lord, but we got what we came for in the end. He stated dutifully. Good, good, come take a seat. We have some things to discuss. Lord Wyman said, before turning to Sir Marlon, "Thank you cousin, you're free the rest of the day as promised." Sir Marlon nodded happily before he left the solar. Lord Wiman turned to John. "So John, are you still enjoying your time with my son?" "Very much so, my lord. Sir Wendell is a great teacher in many things and, if I may be so bold, great company besides," he said dutifully, but with a faint smile on his face. "Ha ha, that he is lad. Taking you from Winterfell was one of my boy's greater ideas, as I may say so. I have heard from Wendell that you have been a great help these past 2 years and your mind would otherwise have gone to waste there." The large man laughed, before his face suddenly turned serious. "It's about Winterfell I want to talk to you about, lad. We had news about next month's harvest feast. Has something happened? Is my father all right?" he asked immediately. No, lad, your family is all fine. However, there will be another guest joining the feast this year," Lord Wiman said, as he studied his face. "Who?" he asked, relieved his family is fine. "Lord Edmure Tully, to look at your brother Brandon who will foster with his kin in Riverrun." "Oh," he responded with big eyes. "Yes, I'm afraid so, lad," the Lord of White Harbor said, sympathy clearly visible across his face. "I wanted to talk to you so you could prepare and might know what to expect. It's possible the man will see you as even more of an insult on his family than Lady Catelyn does. Try to keep a low profile while he is there. Spend more time with your other siblings, not Bran, as that might help to keep the attention away from you. You'll also be welcome at the table of most northern lords, if you wish to escape things for a while. I'm sure of it. You'll always have a seat at mine and my son's, that's for sure." John looked shocked. "My lord, Bran is my brother. I can't ignore the boy, nor will I," he exclaimed. "Sure, that's not what I meant, John. At feasts and in the open spend less time with him, you can make up for it to the boy in private," the large lord said calmingly. He thought it over. It might have some merit. Bran loves stories, so he could make up for it by telling him all of his adventures and the exotic tales he heard in Bravos and Pentos. If he could do it before bedtime or the like, no one would notice. His brother wouldn't mind, he knew that. "I'll think it over, my lord," he said evenly. Looking pleased, Lord Wiman replied, "That's all I'm asking for, John, thank you. Now, do you still have some time left? I would like to take a personal look at your education, if it's possible. It's been a few months since I was personally involved with your lessons. My son does a great job, I'm sure, but I'm sure I might be able to teach you another trick or two when it comes to politics and diplomacy." He nodded and they spent the next hours studying a lot of subjects. Over a month later at the harvest feast. Eddard. He looked over the great hall as the feast was in full swing, pleased with how everything was going. More than a few of his bannermen had chosen to go to Winterfell this year, and as such almost all of the large space was filled up with men drinking. House Glover was represented by Robert and his wife. They sat together with 2 of Mage's daughters. On the table next to them, Meja and Cleesewin sat together with House Castle. The heavily pregnant Jonelle Castle seemed very happy to have all her family together like that. More to the front sat the Carstocks, as all 3 of Ricard's sons had accompanied Rob together and they were sitting with small Janumber and Brandon Norrie. Besides that, Houses Tallheart, Flint and Locke all had representatives present at the lower tables. The most curious northern attendants were without a doubt Lady Barbary Dustin and one of her brothers, Ricard Riswell. They had even gotten some cousins to accompany them. Although it shouldn't surprise him really, as he and Sansa will accompany them to Barrowtown right after the feast. If you counted all of these houses' retainers, he estimated over 400 people were residing in his hall right now. His own table wasn't any less curious, with Lords Wiman Marndale, Lord John Umber, Lady Mage Mormont and their respective daughters here to accompany Arya, sitting among his family. However, it was the presence of Edmure Tully that made the combination of these northern lords and lady with their little girl seem even more strange. Edmure was talking to Cat about things in the south, but not without giving John and the Mormont and Umber ladies sidelong glances every once in a while. Bran and Arya were enjoying themselves with Mage and Lyanna Mormont, as well as Alera Umber and surprisingly Wyler Marndale. He found it quite funny that the only hope left for Cat to influence Arya in a southern way was behaving almost as rowdy as Arya herself. That made him grudgingly think of how House Royce had rebuked his offer. Apparently Yon's wife hadn't seen a northern fostering as a good idea for their daughter, and he couldn't possibly accept their offer to send Arya to Runestone. As such, no deal with the Royces had been made, and only the 3 northern ladies would have to do for Arya as companions. He knew his wife had had a hard time accepting this, but similar rebukes on the same southern grounds by houses Bracken and Vance had made her give in eventually. Besides Arya and Bran, Sansa was having a polite conversation with Wyman Mandaeli. As he looked beside her, he looked on intrigued as he saw Robb and Jon in deep conversation with Jon Umber. He would have to ask them tomorrow what it was they talked about. All in all, it seemed things were going reasonably well, he thought. In the past weeks the thing he had feared most hadn't come to pass, a confrontation between Edmure and Jon. It might have been Jon's doing though, as he noted how the boy had managed to disappear from almost all formal events. He had also spent almost no time with Bran, as Edmure accompanied the boy a lot, to be able get to know him. He had been quite worried about this, but when he had talked to Bran about it, he couldn't help but laugh. Bran had whispered to him how Jon sneaked into his room almost every night to tell him stories of his travels and the world across the narrow sea. Jon had apparently told the boy they had to spend less time in public together, as he didn't want to fight with his mother's family. As a compensation, Bran had told him with a huge smile, Jon had promised him 30 stories. It seemed Lord Wyman's cunning ways were already rubbing off on Jon, he mused. What man could have anything against it, he thought, when it was used by someone to keep his younger brother happy. As such he did nothing but look in fascination, as Jon managed to give an excuse almost every night to leave early so he could go read his brother a story. A few hours later he saw that, even tonight, was no exception. Jon left the room and his talks at the lower tables with Robb and the Karstarks and Umbers shortly after Bran was put to bed. He only resurfaced half an hour later. The knowing look on Robb's face when Jon came back made him think that his eldest son was in on the whole thing and kept those people with questions about Jon's disappearance at bay. That made him really happy, as he had feared that fosterage would have weakened the ties between both boys. Looking upon them now, he had no doubt they would always be close, no matter the circumstances. When he and Catelyn finally left to go to sleep, he was feeling happy. His decisions over the last years had been good for his family. Besides, seeing Arya connect with his bannerman's daughters made every ounce of doubt disappear that now would be any different. Sure, the whole household was in for a hard time as Arya and her little gang would no doubt trouble everyone, but maybe they would also make Arya more susceptible to some of her duties. Beside him, Cat also looked pleased. Before the last 3 weeks, she hadn't seen Edmure in years, and talking to him about the south and clearing up the things with houses Vance and Bracken made his wife feel better. This combination of good feelings made them embrace lightly when they entered the bedroom. After a while, Cat broke off the kiss. "I'm not too old yet, even Mayor Stillowin says so, I can still give you another son," she said as she looked timidly at him with her bright blue eyes. He could see the desire behind those words and cupped his wife's head in his hand. "Cat, you have given me everything I ever wanted, and more. You don't need to give me another son or daughter. I love you and you are here with me, and that's all that matters," he said as he pierced into the bright blue of his wife's eyes. She didn't let him say more, as she kissed him fiercely, and before long, her dress fell to the floor as he carried her to the bed. He woke up still a little sore of last night's love-making. As he looked beside him, he could see his wife's auburn hair sprawled all over the mattress, and he chuckled. He would never tire of the sight, he thought. He apparently woke her up with this as she looked up at him with a smile. "Good morning." He kissed her lightly as a response, and they cuddled up to each other. "What do you have planned today?" she asked him, her head upon his chest. "This morning I have a few conversations with the Tall Hearts and one of the Flints. After that, I will have to make the last preparations of tomorrow's hunt and take a look at the stores to know how much we will have to refill after this year's feast. All in all, I hope that I have time enough to go take a look at Robb's sword training today. I haven't seen him in action yet this year and want to see his progress. Besides, a lot of other young northern nobles will be there and it wouldn't hurt to assess their strength as well," he said pensively. She looked up towards him. "Can't the stores wait until they have left, my love? We only see Robb a few weeks a year anymore, that's more important, I think." He looked to her for a few seconds before saying, "You might be right. I will ask Veon if there is anything that is urgent, and if not, I will go see Rob. She nodded happily and drew him closer. After 10 more minutes enjoying each other's company, they got up, made ready and left to their respective tasks. The talks were pretty basic, they were about roads, harvests and taxes. The hunt still asked for a lot of work, but they had it done by the early afternoon. After Veon had had to ensure him 3 times there was nothing urgent to look at with the stores, he sighed and went on his way. He made his way to the bridge between the keep and the armory. There was a window there, from which he could look at the yard. He decided that, as he was earlier than he had thought, he would look upon the boys training without them knowing first. He knew firsthand how the pressure of one's father looking on your training could mess things up. Especially if that father was Lord of Winterfell, he thought with memories long past flooding his mind. After a few minutes pondering the past, he finally cleared his head as he reached the window. He looked down and saw the training yard was full, as a lot of the northern nobles had also come out to train. He saw Rob and Jon training under the watchful eye of Sir Roderick. They were accompanied by the 3 Karstark brothers, as well as small Jon Umber and Brandon Neri. As he looked on, he saw that although all those boys were older than Rob and Jon, some were really already men, both held their ground admiringly. Especially Jon seemed to have a talent for sword fighting, he noted when he saw the 2 boys facing off against each other. Rob however seemed to have learned a lot at Carhold, as he almost managed to disarm his brother with a trick he had once seen Cregan Karstark perform at the Battle of the Bells. As the fight kept on going, he saw Arya and her friends cheer on both boys to their limits, and he smiled at the sight of his wild daughter. As he looked around, he saw that most of the other fights had stopped, as the whole of the northern nobility present looked on with interest at the future of House Stark. The battle finally drew to a close after more than 10 minutes when Jon managed to trip Rob to the ground. Yield. He heard Jon call clearly with his sword against Rob's neck. He saw much of the yard looked on warily as Jon won. I yield. Rob laughed, that was a good showing, Snow, you deserve it. Although I almost had you there in the beginning. He heard the boy say, the laugh never leaving his face. I Stark, you nearly did. You'll have to teach me that move sometime. I'll show you what Sir Marlon taught me about footwork in return. Jon replied happily as the brothers clapped each other on the back to the joy of many in the yard. Many of his noblemen looked to be very happy at the bond between the brothers. Nothing that was all too surprising, he thought. The North and House Stark had seen more than enough rebellions and civil wars in their existence, none would be happy to see strife between brothers. The men, satisfied, quickly went on their way or back to their own spas. There was one who did not seem pleased, he noted, as Edmure Tully walked in on the training yard with some of his retainers at his side. The auburn-haired young man seemed wroth as he looked upon the situation. He walked up to Jon and he heard him shout, how dare you lay a hand on the rightful heir at Winterfell? In front of all his future vassals. If only my sister knew, you would be thrown out of this castle onto the streets in an instant. He heard the Riverlander say. Curses, he thought, and he ran towards the keep and down the stairs to the training yard. When he finally arrived, he saw the situation had quickly spiraled out of control. Edmure and a few of his knights and retainers stood with bared steel across from Jon. Behind Jon stood the Karstark, Umber and Neri boys with their tourney swords, however they were backed by their own retainers, as well as the Mandaeally guards who had taken out their steel. Rob stood in front of Jon and he heard him shout in a heated discussion with Edmure, as Roderick desperately tried to defuse the situation. What is the meaning of this? He bellowed as he walked across the yard. At his words many of the Winterfell guards, as well as bannermen, flocked to his side. The discussion also stopped as both sides looked at him. He saw how the Mandaeally guards lowered their swords, as all men behind Jon acknowledged his presence. Lord Edmure, can you explain to me why you and your men dare to bear life steel against my family in my own home? He said, his voice suddenly icily calm, when he reached them. Lord Eddard, your bastard here dared to embarrass Rob in front of all of your vassals. He even went as far as to say the heir of Winterfell needed his tutoring. After I commented on this, both he and some of your vassals' sons dared to openly disagree with this and even insulted me. The Tully heir stated with pretension. Behind him many of the Northmen who had witnessed everything started mumbling at this. Not agreeing at all with this version of the facts. That's not true, father, Jon and I were having a spar, and when He held up his hand to cut off his son's attempt to defend his brother. "No need for that, Rob. I was looking at you both spar through the bridge at the armory when it all started," he said as he looked at both boys. Rob seemed pleased and John seemed surprised, but both didn't say anything. "Now Lord Edmure, before you arrived the boys had been sparring over 10 minutes, as they used to do almost every day before they went out to foster." John surely didn't embarrass Rob as it was a very close fight and the comments after that were good-natured banter between boys. Banter I have been hearing quite a lot and not only preserved for them, as some of my bannermen also joined in, sometimes to Rob's expense. As he nodded to the boys behind John. "Some of that banter was a lot worse than what John said and I see no problem with it, although I don't think I like the name Redstock," he said as he looked at the Carstocks, Torren quickly avoiding his gaze as he shuffled on his feet. "Anyway, there was nothing wrong here and I would appreciate it if you and your men put up your swords," he finished saying to the Tullier. The man looked red in the face with anger. "You can't be serious, Eddard. This boy insults the ground my sister stands on and is a constant danger to your legitimate children's birthright. You not only let him live here, you seat him with your vassals and let him insult Rob's name and prowess in the yard for all to see. The boy should be thrown out this instant," he said with his sword still in his hand. "As I already said, Lord Edmure, John did not insult Rob in any way and I seated him with his brother, not my vassals. As you failed to have noticed, Rob and John are not only brothers, they are also best friends. I seat them with each other for their own pleasure, especially for Rob after Theon Greyjoy left, nothing more." He rebuked his brother in was as ridiculous suggestions. He tried to sound as diplomatic as possible, but he knew the stare he gave with his grey eyes would hammer the point home. "As for now, you and you men will put up your swords in my home or my men will take it from you," he added icily. He Tully man stared at him but put up his sword. "You cannot stand for this, Eddard. The boy and your men afterwards insulted me, the son of a Lord Paramount. They also laughed at my men, some also sons lords of respected Riverland houses like Vance and Piper. I did not see this, as I rushed down," he said pensively as he looked at the situation. It was clear the Riverlanders were looking at him in anger and he couldn't afford to affront those houses, least of all House Tully if he was to send Bran there. He finally added, "John, excuse yourself for your words to Lord Edmure and his men." The boy looked at him in thought and seemed to understand his reasoning. John sighed and turned to Edmure Tully. "Father, you can't be silly," Rob interrupted, but he cut off his retort with a stern gaze. He shook his head at Rob before looking again at John. "Go on, John." The boy nodded and said, "I excuse myself for the words I have said, my lords, especially to you, Lord Edmure. I forgot my place and it will not happen again." The Tullier looked smugly at John before again turning to him. "And your vassals?" "I will have words with my vassals in private, be certain of that," he stated calmly to the Tully. Thinking it over, Edmure saw the situation as they were outnumbered at least 50 to 1 by Northmen. Coming to the obvious conclusion, the man nodded to him and left. He looked around the yard. "Rob, John, join me in my solo with your companions." He looked around and saw Robert Glover standing behind him in training leathers with Lady Mage. "Lady Mage, Robert, join me. The rest of you go along with your day," he said, and he left the yard. Inside his solo he asked Rob and John to retell their tales. Mage and Robert filled in the more heated parts with comments of their own. In the middle of it, John Umber stormed in. He made the large men shut up but allowed him to stay as they continued on with their tale. At the end of it, he sighed. "It is as I feared then." He turned to the boys accompanying his sons. "Your reactions were hasty and not well thought out, but I thank you for defending my family anyway. I know that if House Stark are ever in need that you will be there for them and the North, and it does me great pleasure," he stated honestly. They looked at him surprised, probably expecting a reprimand. After a while he saw all 5 of them nod to him, respect obvious in their eyes and that of the great Jon. "Thank you, my lord, you can always count on us," Harry on Karstark replied strongly. A chorus of "I" was heard. "I and the North cannot afford to offend House Tully, as it is our primary import of food in case of winter. I would like for all of us here to keep that relationship. However, Lord Edmure was far out of line and Lord Hoster will know about this, be sure of that." he said as he looked around the room. He then settled on Rob. Rob, I know you want to protect John and I commend you for it, but alienating your mother's family is not the way to do it. Through your mother you may one day have the opportunity to elevate the North's position in the South as well. Don't ruin that possibility now. If something else happens with Lord Edmure, don't do anything and let me know, I will deal with it. His son nodded to him. At last he looked at John. John, I know that what I made you do out there was hard and not right, but it needed to be done. Otherwise the North could have been in trouble. I thank you for the sacrifice you made and be sure that I will make it up to you. I will also make sure Edmure's father hears of it so Edmure's behavior will not go unpunished, I promise you that. He saw how the boy looked shocked at him for his reaction as if he was surprised that he would do such effort for a bastard. He sighed, I care for you John. It is true you don't have my name, but no one, not my vassals, nor Lord Edmure, nor my wife will ever be able to evict you out of Winterfell. You have Stark blood and Winterfell is your home for as long as you wish it, I promise you that. He saw that the boy was almost in tears, but Rob stepped up to help his brother. When I'm Lord, I won't evict your long face either Snow, whatever my mother or uncle says. It wouldn't be the same for me if I had to try and hit a less pretty face than yours in the training yard. He said as he clapped John on the shoulder. John looked smilingly up to Rob and he sighed. Crisis averted, he thought, but I still need to speak to Kat. Chapter 8, An Unexpected Trip. 297 AC. Rob. He was training in the yard at Carhold with Eddard, Torren and Osric. It was a cloudy morning and the shadows the clouds threw over the dark grey stones of Carhold gave him a calming, but also foreboding feeling. As he looked back to the fight, he saw the watchful eyes of Cregan Karstark stare at Torren and Osric's sparring match. He stood there, judging every move, whilst every so often making a small comment on either their footwork, posture or technique with the sword. He had to admit to himself that Cregan was an excellent master at arms, although he didn't much like the man. Even his nephew Osric wasn't taken by his uncle, nonetheless they all obeyed him in the yard. He was after all one of Lord Ricard's most trusted men. He was also a great swordsman, who acquired a considerable reputation for himself in Robert's rebellion. All the more reason to learn from the man, he thought to himself. As he saw Ed disarm his older cousin, he knew it would soon be his turn to fight Tor. He picked up his training sword and turned it around in his hand a few times until the grip was good. He grinned at his friend as they made their way to the middle of the grounds, but before they could start they were interrupted by new arrivals. Lord Ricard approached them, accompanied by Harry and the captain of the guards Harmond Turrell. The latter was a giant of a man, with a big moustache in the same brown color as the long hair flowing across his shoulders. Rob estimated he was past 30 years of age, maybe a little closer to 40. He was also a veteran of the rebellion, a thing clearly visible from the small scar splitting his right eyebrow in two. The man stood stoically next to Harry as Lord Ricard moved forward. Boys, training is over for today. There has been some commotion along the Bolton border. Multiple small folk families have been reported to be seen crossing the last river with several bodies washing up on either shore. Harry here will lead a party to investigate what is going on and you will accompany him. He looked in surprise to Lord Ricard and then to his friends. He saw Ed and Tor look wide-eyed between their fathers' and brothers' faces to see if this was serious or not. Having apparently decided that it was, a broad grin started to display on Ed's face, a smile that was only dwarfed by the one Tor gave him back. Both were probably eager for adventure. All the while, Osric only nodded dutifully at his lord and he awkwardly did the same. Content with that, while eyeing his younger sons suspiciously, Lord Ricard continued. I don't expect any trouble, but you never know with the Boltons. As such Harmond and 50 good men will accompany you all, while the local masterly house will also be ready to assist if needed. For security reasons you will all be allowed to carry live steel, but misuse it and it will be years before you ever see it again. The grin on Tor and Ed's faces just became a little larger, he noticed. The Lord of Carhold turned first to his eldest son. This is Harry's first command as my heir in such a task before turning back to them, so I expect you all to be on your best behavior to assist him in this task. Show the people here that House Karstark and Stark are united and ready to help them in any way possible. The last words were said with a finality in his voice that no one would ever dare to question. It is at least a 5 days ride to the border, so there is no time to waste. I expect you to pack your things and be ready to ride out within the hour. Lord Ricard said before adding. Oh, and if any of you forget to say your goodbyes to Alice, or in Osric's case his mother, I will have you clean out the stables for a month after you return. The Lord added sternly, looking intensely at his 2 younger sons. They all nodded and went on their way to pack, but before he could leave the yard Lord Ricard stopped him. Rob, a word. He nodded dutifully and went to his foster father. Rob, you will be the youngest one on this trip, maybe even too young if I'm not going personally. However, Cregan has told me you are capable with your sword and you have a good head on your shoulders, so I'm letting you go anyway. At those words he felt a pride swell up from within himself, as the stern lord almost never complimented anyone. As he stuffed his chest out a little, Lord Ricard continued, with a knowing look in his eyes. More importantly, you are by far the most valuable person going. I don't expect the Boltons to do anything at all, but you would be the only target valuable enough to the north to try anything for at all. As such, I have instructed 3 of my best guards to protect you at all times, no matter what happens. Harmond here will also keep a personal eye on you, if he is not busy with helping Harry on. All of it had been in an unusual tone. Rob looked up surprised as he recognized it as concern. He saw the giant captain of the guard give a reassuring nod at him, while his foster father looked at him pensively. After a short silence, he responded, the 2 older man hesitatingly. I thank you both for the effort. I will try to keep out of trouble and listen to Harry on and the captain at all times. Lord Ricard clapped him on the shoulder. Good lad, I'm happy you take things seriously. It will do you good as future lord of all these lands to see its people and territory for yourself. Another benefit is that if the Boltons do try something, you will see them for what they are worth now and will be cautious of them in your reign. The Lord of Carhold looked down on him seriously, as he repeated a lesson to him that he had heard a lot the past few years. Never trust the Boltons. At the same time, you must take care. Your father could have my head, if something were to happen to you on my watch. Besides that, you have grown very dear to my family and I these last 3 to 4 years. We would hate to see something happen to you. My sons consider you as a younger brother, my daughter has nothing but praise for you and I am very proud of you, my boy. You will make a great lord of Winterfell one day and it will be or my sons, pleasure to follow you one day. He didn't know what he'd just heard. Lord Ricard Carstark was usually very stern and never this open, as such he didn't know how to respond, although he was filled with more pride than ever before. Luckily it was the man himself that also broke the ice. Hells, even my grumpy Uncle Arnulf says you have some potential, that alone is a miracle in itself, as he likes no one except Cregan. He started laughing loudly and Harmond joined him. Not being able to hold himself whilst thinking of Arnulf Carstark, he chuckled as well. Now go get ready, Rob. Oh, the threat of not saying goodbye to Alice. That also counts for you, of course, so I would run if I were you. You are the last one to get ready. Lord Ricard grinned at him and he realized looking around that everyone had long left the training yard. He nodded respectfully and ran off to his room to get his stuff together. He would need his sword, the edged one with the wolf pummel he got from the Carstark family for his last name-a-day. Besides that, he would need cloths, riding boots, a cloak and paper and quill to ride to his father. He hoped there would be a rookery in some of the masterly house's keeps. Otherwise his father would be incredibly mad at him. He gathered everything he needed, including the new gloves he had received from Sansa. He put the sword on his belt and packed his stuff nicely, in a way they would fit in his 2 saddlebags, and went on his way to find Alice. He found her at the entrance of the Godswood, just as Ed and Tor were leaving. Tor laughed at him. Hurry, you're going to be late, Redstark. At this rate we'll leave without you. He wanted to retort, but, before he got the chance, he heard Alice her high voice. Tor, you forgot both your cloak and gloves and need to go all the way back to the keep for it. So, I think Rob will be fine. He grinned at his friend who cringed at his sister's message and ran to the keep while Ed laughed loudly, as he strolled across the castle to the stables. He walked up to the girl and smiled at her. Good afternoon, Alice. She smiled back at shyly. Good day, Rob, are you leaving too? Yes, I am. He said, suddenly feeling sad about the fact he would be gone for the next fortnight. It looked like she felt the same way and, as he didn't want to disappoint her, he said, "I know we won't be able to talk for the next few days as we normally do, but if you'd like I can walk with you for a little while now." Surprised, she looked at him. "Won't you get in trouble if you're late?" "I think I have a little time left, shall we?" he said reassuringly. "Gladly," and she gave him the most beautiful smile he had ever seen. They went on their way and by habit they walked towards the old weirwood tree, its serious face looking down on them from above. Not knowing when he could pray the next time, he got down on one knee and did a very small prayer. He asked for success in their mission and safety for his companions, his family and Alice and Lord Ricard here in Carhold. Alice joined in next to him and said her own prayers. A small voice inside his head hoped she would also pray for his safe return. As they got up and walked back, they talked about his upcoming trip and what Alice would be doing in the meantime. After another few minutes, they were almost back at the gates. Alice stopped him and looked at him with a slight blush on her cheeks. "I wanted to give you something before you left." He looked at her questioningly, not knowing what it was. As nothing happened after that, he asked after a few seconds. "Thank you, Alice, you shouldn't have, but what is it?" She suddenly closed the gap between them and brushed her lips very slightly against his, before taking a big step back. He looked at her completely flustered. He felt his cheeks becoming hot and he imagined that he looked like a complete idiot. Her eyes were shining and her pretty hair fell across her right eye as she looked at the ground timidly. I'm sorry, Rob. It was stupid, I just wanted to show you I care." Taking in what she meant, an awkward grin spread across his young blushing face. You care about you too, Alice. I was just surprised, that is all. You need to go see your brothers now. I think I'm late already," he said, trying to get out of this awkward situation. His emotions were all over the place and he didn't really know what to do now, as he had never been kissed before. After saying another awkward goodbye, he almost ran out of the Godswood. Seeing everybody already mounted waiting on him in the courtyard, he started to run for real. Luckily for him, he saw that Eddard had already saddled his horse. He ran up to it, put all his stuff away safely and jumped on its back. All the while he heard the older men chuckle, while Lord Ricard and Harry looked sternly in his direction. "Where are you still coming from? You're late," Lord Ricard demanded to know sternly, from his position beside Harry on's horse. "I wanted to say a prayer in the Godswood before I left, my lord. I'm sorry I'm late," he answered, knowing full well that the old lord had a great affinity for the old gods. He also seemed to make it a big point of his education. It probably had to do something with his mother believing in the seven and him not following her path. Besides, he had actually prayed, it was not like it was a complete lie. Lord Ricard seemed to accept that. He might have gotten away with it, if not for Torren. As his foster brother started to laugh uncontrollably, so much so he almost fell from his horse. Ed next to him started laughing too, although a bit more controlled than his younger brother. "What do you think is so damn funny, boy? Don't you dare laugh at a man's devotion to the gods," Lord Ricard shouted sternly, looking not at all pleased with the actions of his youngest son. "No, father, I would never dare to laugh at man's devotion to the gods. A man's devotion to Alice, who was with him in the Godswood all this time, I find hilarious however." Tom managed to get out, while tears of laughter streaked down his cheeks. At this comment, the whole party started looking at him. He felt his cheeks burn hot again, as he thought about Alice's lips brushing against his own. He wasn't the only one to notice this however, as all men in the yard joined Tom and Ed in their laughter. Even Harry had a knowing smile on his face and winked at him. Lord Ricard looked at him with a serious and calculating expression on his face. "Is this true, Rob? Were you with Alice in the Godswood?" he asked him, not unkindly. "Well, yes, my lord. You told me to say goodbye to Alice, so we, walked around in the Godswood and prayed and talked together before I came here," he managed to stammer out. At this the laughter became even greater and even Ed had to wipe a little tear from his eye. Lord Ricard looked at him silently for a long while, before nodding and getting back to business. "Everybody straight in the saddle, you'll be leaving now. Fill in after Harry and Harmond." The men quickly calmed down, although Tok kept glancing at him with a knowing smile on his face. Harry On called out and they all left through the gate in 2 columns of riders. 4 days later. It was late in the afternoon and after heavy riding they were within 15 miles of the border now. Some 20 men, coming from a Karstark vassal, had joined them this morning with local guides to lead them to the area where the people had been sighted. He had spent most of the time these past days talking with Ed, To and Osric. Besides that, he'd also had a few conversations with Harry On, Harmond and some of the guards. Harry On kept him up to speed on all new developments and they had an agreement that he was to be seen riding next to him or his brothers at the front, if they came upon any villages or holdfasts. The Karstarks wanted to show off their unity with House Stark, as well as the prestige of fostering their heir to their local subjects. He didn't mind that much as he spent most of his times with the brothers anyway and liked to meet some more of the North's people. At the present Ed and Osric were having a hushed conversation about the tavern wench that shared the former's bed yesterday evening. Apparently Harry On had found out and he had been none too pleased about it. Seeing Ed smile however, he doubted he regretted his actions much. He decided to leave them to their conversation and started looking around at the almost endless fields and hills around him. After a few minutes he saw something out of the corner of his eye and after looking more closely he saw something that looked like people to the west. Contemplating what to do for a few seconds while trying to look what was going on, he made a decision and broke ranks to ride up to the front of the column. A lot of the guardsmen looked strangely at him, but no one said anything. Reaching the front of the column he saw Harry On in deep conversation with Harmond riding to his right and the son of a local nobleman on his left. He steered his horse next to Harmond's and called out to Harry On. Harry On, there are people to the west on the bottom of that hill. They aren't on a road I don't think, and they are marching away from the border as you warned us to look for. Harry On snapped his neck to the side and looked at him. People? Where? In response, he pointed to the hill where he had seen the people moments ago. Somewhere over there, it looked to be at least more than 5. Harry On looked at the hill for a few seconds and finally said. I don't see anyone, are you absolutely sure that you saw them? He nodded heavily. Yes Harry, I am sure. The Karstark heir stroked his beard before asking saying to himself. More than 5, and that can't be a farmer and it is not likely to be merchants out here either. He nodded finally. Thank you Rob, we'll take a look at what's going on. Harry On turned in the saddle and shouted at the top of his lungs. Men, people have been sighted to the west of here. We are going off the road to take a look. Follow in behind and be ready. I want that group encircled before we are within 100 paces of them. We take no risks. After that he turned to him. Rob, I want you to stay close to me and Harmond. The protective detail father assigned to me will follow you everywhere and you are to stay out of things as much as possible, am I understood? He nodded at Harry On and fell in behind him and Harmond with 2 guards immediately flanking him. Scouts were sent to the south and west and the main group picked up pace fast. After a short ride west, they saw a group of around 15 people walking with a cart in the middle. As their group was spotted, he saw knives and axes coming out and he heard scared voices urging people to the cart. They encircled the group at a distance and came to a halt. Harry On rode a few paces forward and shouted to the group. I am Harry On Karstark, the heir to Karhold, what are you doing on my family's lands? State your business. Following this, he heard voices from the group. He couldn't hear what they were saying but managed to pick up Karstark and No Bolton. After a few seconds, a man, deep in his 50s with white streaking his brown beard and hair, stepped forward. He shouted back. Lord, we are here seeking refuge. If you allow us to tell you our tale, you will understand, I hope. We mean no harm. The man sounded both scared and relieved at the same time and after his words made quite a big showing of putting his axe on the ground. This was followed by the people behind him. At this Harry On raised his arm and most of the group trotted forward to the wagon. There Harry On and Harmond descended from their horses, followed by at least a dozen of the guards. Looking more closely at the group he counted 16 people. 5 women, 6 children and only 5 men, of whom 2 were elderly. The healthiest looking of the 2 elder men had been the one who had spoken before and he bowed his head to Harry On. I am Roderick, Lord. These people behind me are my brother, 2 sons and daughter and their families. We originally were a farming family along the Weeping Water, but we have been on the run for weeks now, trying to get away from there. Harry looked the group over and finally deciding they were no threat. He spoke seriously, but not unkindly. Well met, Roderick. As I said, I am Harry Carstark, the heir to Carhold, and I am in command here. I was sent here with my brothers and cousin and a force by my father, Lord Ricard. We are here to investigate groups of people crossing the Bolton border into our lands. I am also accompanied by Robb Stark, the heir to Winterfell. Whatever you are afraid of, you are now safe. My men will give your family food and something to drink, as some of them seem hungry. In turn, I only ask that you tell us your tale in detail. At this a great murmur arose from the group of people. All he could manage to understand however was safe and quite surprisingly Stark. Harry turned to Harmond. We set up camp here for the night. I want sentries to be put in place and guard shifts made up for the night. Make sure these people get food, drink and some cover for the night. Some half a dozen guards can stay with me as I talk to this man. The giant man only nodded as he left, immediately shouting orders to the men. Before he managed to follow the captain of the guards, however, the man called Roderick asked Harry with a strange hoarse voice. Lord, did you say a Stark was with you? Surprised, Harry turned around. Yes, Robb Stark, the heir to Winterfell, is my father's ward. My father tasked him to accompany us here on this mission. Robb, come here. This man wants to see you. He made his way from behind the line of men-at-arms and presented himself to the man. He felt quite unsure about himself, but knew it was his duty to do so. I am Robb Stark, the heir to Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North. Hearing this, the man called Roderick fell to his knees, tears flowing from his face. My lord, the gods are just. Now we can finally get justice for our Bethany and Asa, and for Biron. Oh, thank the gods you found us. The man stammered out. Completely surprised and not knowing what was going on, he and Harry looked towards each other. Finally, Harry nudged him to say something. Please, Roderick, stand up. What is it I can do for you? The man looked at him, got up and told him their whole story. He started by telling that his granddaughters Asa and Sybil had disappeared among similar rumors of disappearances in the surrounding villages. He described how Sybil made it back to them naked, beaten and violated 2 weeks later, with a horrifying tale of how her sister and other girls had been either eaten by savage dogs or flayed alive. He then continued to tell the story of how he had gathered his family and left their farmstead behind. A thing hundreds of common people in the area did these last weeks, according to Roderick. When asked where all these people were, as only a few dozen had been signaled crossing the border, Roderick looked at them sadly. Most were hunted down, I guess. We too were attacked 4 days ago. My nephew Biron and my daughter-in-law Bethany gave their lives to defend our family. The man said as he finally broke down. We had to leave their bodies for the crows, Lord, couldn't give them a proper burial for fear of our own lives. After composing himself again, the man continued. Some of those people might still be on Bolton lands trying to escape. Others might have crossed the border without you knowing yet, as we did 2 days ago. All I know is that from the area at the mouth of the Wendwater hundreds of people left. We even crossed a few of these groups on our own trip, but we haven't seen any for a week now. All he could do was stare at the man. He felt horrified and disgusted at the tale the men had told, and he could taste the bile in his mouth. With some effort he managed to swallow it down and could only think of one thing. What monsters could do such a thing? Harry was first to ask the question though. His friend seemed similarly affected by Roderick's words, but he got control over himself more quickly. Looking from Harry to himself and back, the man answered. That's why we need a Stark, Lord. The monsters, who did this to us, are Lord Bolton's bastard and his friends. I've heard that none, but a Stark, can force Lord Bolton to act and give us the justice we were denied all this time. He looked at the man in shock and didn't know what to say. He was only a boy, not even 14 years old, how could he help against those monsters? Then he looked around at all those people. He saw how some were wounded and almost all looked exhausted, shocked and hungry. He needed to do something. Good man, I feel very sorry about what you had to endure. Your troubles are over now. We will find you food and shelter and a place to call home for the coming time. I will arrange with Lord Carstark that you can get some place to live, so you will never have to go to those lands again, if you do not wish it. Besides that, I will write to my father personally to tell you what has transpired here. He will bring the men responsible to justice, I swear it to you on the old gods. He said impulsively and emotionally. Thank you, Lord, 1,000 times we thank you. The man cried out. Harry on added. It may be however that it takes a while before Lord Eddard can get this thing sorted. In the meantime, you will be given an escort towards the nearest holdfast, so you are safe. At the same time the rest of my men and I will patrol the border, to secure none of these ruffians get here. Hopefully we can help some more of your people along the way. Now go eat and take a rest, Roderick. My men will take care of guard duties and none of your family shall be harmed. Thank you, lords, you both are a gift from the gods. Thank you. The man stammered before he went back to his family, to tell those who couldn't listen of all that had transpired. Rob, a word, now. Harry said, without looking at him, when the man was out of earshot. He walked up to where Harry went to, 2 guards loyally following behind. The 5-year-older boy looked at him. That was really irresponsible what you did there, Rob. He said, but there was no bite in his voice. What? He managed to get out, totally surprised about the reaction, as all he could think about was the horrible fate the farmer's family had endured. You made promises you may not be able to keep. That can be a dangerous thing to do for a lord. People won't respect you if they do not think your word is worth something. You are not the Lord of the North, your father is. He gave you no authority to deal with these kinds of situations, let alone promise justice on a member of House Bolton. What do you think is going to happen, Rob? You think he is just going to send a raven and Roose Bolton is going to become a kinslayer for it? But we need to help these people, Harry. These people deserve justice and my father will think the same, I'm sure. We cannot let these monsters roam free in the north and do that to these people. He answered exasperated. I know, Rob, I know. I am equally disgusted at what the Bolton bastard did to those people. I also hope your father sees it the same way, but even if he does, it is not that easy. The Boltons are the strongest house in the north, except for House Stark and maybe House Marndale. If Roose Bolton isn't willing to hand over his bastard, let alone deal justice on him, then this could mean trouble and it won't be easy. Do you understand? Thinking over Harry's words, he started to realize what this could mean. Would father give over John without a fight? He slowly nodded to Harry and answered sadly, I think I understand. Looking him over, his foster brother put his hand on his shoulder. Good, ruling is never easy, Rob, remember that. Especially in situations such as these. For now, we will do all we can for these people and try to save as many more as we can. We will patrol the border a lot more, to ensure none of their atrocities will be committed on Carstark lands at least. If we catch any of these criminals, their heads will be put on spikes, I'll make sure of that. Does that sound reasonable to you? Feeling slightly less powerless, he answered fiercely. Yes, Harry, thank you. Good, now I will write letters to my father to explain the situation and I expect you to do the same to yours. The letters will leave on the morrow. I will also ask my father and the surrounding holdfasts here for extra men to strengthen the border, as well as have men to spare to accompany all the people I hope to find safely. Now go and help set up camp, I have a lot to do and think over. I will, Harry. He said, as he left to find Ed and To. If anyone could cheer him up from the horrid picture that was stuck in head, it was them. Chapter 9, Dealing with Letters. 297 AC. Eddard. When he reached his solar early in the morning, he hoped the business with the Tullys would finally be done. He had sent many letters to his father-in-law and things were finally dying down. He looked down on the letters that Lewin had already stacked on his desk. Just as he had thought, the top one bore the Tully sigil. He opened it, read through it and sighed from relief. Finally, Lord Hoster accepted his words and put the whole thing to bed. It had been idiotic from the start, confronting John in the middle of the yard with all his vassals there. He loved Kat, but her brother was, although good-natured, an idiot sometimes. To fix things with the Riverlands, he had written to Hoster immediately after Ed Muir left. Hoster had been shocked and had promised to punish Ed Muir. As a way to make up for it, a small discount was promised on the import of grain from the Riverlands for the next winter. Nothing major, but everything helped. It also was a good show of faith, which placated his vassals. Hoster had apparently been scared he didn't wish Bran to foster there anymore, due to Ed Muir's influence, but that had never been the case. He had made a promise to Cat, and the connections Bran could make for the north there were too valuable. After assuring Hoster that Bran would still be coming to Riverrun when he was 8 years old, the old man suddenly started inquiring about Jon. They had never spoken about him and he had wanted to keep it that way, but alas, it seemed that although Hoster strongly disapproved of his son's actions, he did share at least some of his concerns. So, in his last letter he had made it clear that Jon would always remain welcome in Winterfell, that he was expected to serve under Robb later on, there would not be a legitimization, and that many a bastard of Winterfell had done so before without any problem. He also told him about the things he had done to secure Robb's future with the fostering and the promise he would marry a bannerman's daughter. As to show Robb would be very secure when it was his time to take the Lord's duties on himself. He had also reassured his father-in-law that Robb was well liked with his vassals and no problems would ever arise. To him this was all a waste of time. Jon would never do anything to him or Robb. He could trust the boy with their lives if needed. However, he could understand the aging man's concerns about his grandchildren and legacy. As such, he had wanted to put them to rest, without allowing anyone to question his treatment of Jon. It seemed the man's health was starting to deteriorate slightly and that he wanted to make sure his legacy would remain intact. Reading through Hoster's response now, the man at least seemed somewhat assured and would put the whole issue to rest finally. They set a date for Bran's fostering at 2 months after his 8th birthday, and that was that. Finally letting go of the issue, he continued reading his letters. The first 2 letters were from Lords Umber and Marndale inquiring about their girls' education in Winterfell. He put them on the side, as they could wait on more pressing matters. The following letters were updates on the road network. Everything was going according to plan, so he quickly skipped over them. He studied the last of those more closely, however, as it was accompanied by a detailed analysis on what should be done if he ever wanted to restore Moat Cailin. As he had feared it would cost a fortune to restore it to its former glory, so that would be impossible. Nevertheless, the letter was still very interesting. The Master Mason, he had sent there, had made a detailed prediction in how much time and at what cost the different stages of repair could be done. Looking over it, it seemed that the craftsmen thought it feasible and recommendable if they were to stabilize the 3 remaining towers and clear the former castle grounds. It would ensure that those 3 towers would remain and be strengthened. The clearing of the grounds would give them a possibility to take inventory of which stones and materials they still had laying around there and what could be used in a possible future reconstruction. The craftsman also said that the space, once cleared, was large enough to build an inn, stables and even more buildings to the side. All of this could be done without compromising a possible reconstruction in the future. That was a really interesting idea, as it could boost trade if Moat Cailin was made a valuable resting and supplying point for merchants. The merchants going from Barrowton to White Harbour and vice versa, or from either one of those or even Wintertown to the Riverlands, would massively benefit from it. He pondered the ideas for a few moments before putting the letter to the side. He would have to discuss this with Lewin, but he was of a mind to make the repairs and clear the grounds anyway. It would help the defense of the north greatly for the small cost it would take. Maybe even more importantly was the fact that it would make a total reconstruction of the fortress a lot more feasible for his successors in the future. The possible investment in the area, to convert it to a resupply center, would have to be decided on with Lewin and Veon. The idea had merit but would come at a cost of both coin and people, and they needed to be sure that it would be worth it before doing anything. All in all, he was very pleased with this development and decided he would reward the craftsman for his excellent work when he returned. For now, he had other matters to attend to. The next letter was from Lady Barbary, as he recognized her personal sigil. Sansa had finally left for Barrowton 3 months ago. Both Catelyn and he had accompanied her there while Brandon was the Stark in Winterfell under the watchful guidance of Lewin, Roderick and Veon. Meager even visited once or twice to help out, under the premise of visiting his daughter and his newborn grandson, he had heard upon his return. They had stayed at Barrow Hall for just over 2 weeks as they had looked closely how Sangza was settling in. In that time, it was made clear that the dislike Barbary had for him hadn't lessened. He couldn't say he had been surprised sadly. What did have him in utter shock, was the almost immediate liking Barbary took to Sangza. Yes, she criticized her too harshly for believing in the southern stories, but besides that she seemed to really like his daughter. Sangza seemed to like her just as much it seemed, as she almost started to follow her around by the time they left. He left with a dubious feeling in his stomach. He knew she would be treated well, and she could learn a lot from Barbary. Any woman capable of taking over the lordship after her husband's dead with less than a year of marriage under her belt would be a formidable teacher in how to govern. He had his doubts about her other opinions however, how she felt about him, the South and the Maester order bothered him in no small way and he hoped Sangza would not take a liking to it. He had prepared Sangza as best as he could for it and now it was out of his hands. Another thing that was bothering him was the not so subtle fact that she was already looking for a betrothal between Sangza and her nephew. The boy, Domeric he thought he was called, was the son of Roose Bolton and Barbary's sister. Although it would be a very strong match for the North's future, he was loath to send his soft charming daughter to the dread fort with Roose. The boy himself had apparently just come back from the Vale, after serving under Lord Redfort for 3 years. Lady Barbary probably saw the betrothal as some rectification of the past, as she was denied her Stark betrothal by his father. Whatever the case, Sangza was now with her and no betrothal would be talked about any time soon. Since they left, he had gotten weekly letters from Sangza and monthly ones from Barbary on her development. As he read through Barbary's letter, everything seemed in order. After reading it again, he put it away in his pocket to show it to Kat later today. As he looked to his desk, he saw 2 letters remain. One from Rob and another one from Lord Ricard. That is curious, he thought. He didn't expect another letter from Lord Ricard for another few weeks. Deciding to open his son's letter first, he broke the Stark seal with a smile and started reading. Dear Father, I write to you with awful news. A few days ago, a lot of common people were seen crossing the last river from the Bolton lands and Lord Ricard sent Harry to investigate the issue. Ed, Osric and I were allowed to accompany him with his guard. Close to the border we found a farmer called Roderick with his family fleeing the lands around the Weeping Water. He told us a story about how his granddaughters went missing at the same time as a lot of other girls in the region. After a few weeks one of the granddaughters made it back home, wounded, beaten and raped. That isn't the worst however, she tells a story about other girls, among them her sister, being ripped to pieces by dogs or even flayed alive. I heard the girl and her grandfather myself father, it was horrible. It seems the story doesn't stand alone, as hundreds of people have started fleeing the region. Many of them disappear before ever reaching the Karstark border and bodies are seen washing up on the shore almost every day. The family in question was attacked as well before crossing the border and lost 2 more people because of it. The monsters that seem to have done this are a large group of ruffians and criminals being led by the bastard of Roose Bolton. As such Harry doesn't dare take action in his own hand in fear of causing a war with House Bolton. The people asked me as your son and the representative of our house for justice. It is our duty to make sure this stops, and these monsters are made to pay for what they did to these people. I implore and ask you to do what is right. Your loyal son, Robb Stark. He stared in utter shock at the parchment in his hands. The writing was unmistakably his son's, but the words seemed foreign. They were too mature and almost distant for a boy of that age. Only the use of his friend's beloved nicknames had some resemblance with the boy's former letters. It looked like his son had seen and heard too much for a boy his age and it had clearly shocked him. After pondering how he could help his son and what he could respond to him, his eyes were drawn to the letters on the paper again. Only now he started to realize what it actually said. If true, Roose Bolton's bastard was a monster and his son implored him to take action. He immediately shot into action. Tom, he called out sharply. The door opened and the guard walked in. Yes, Lord. Bring Maester Lewin, Roderick and Jory Castle and my wife here. If any of them have lessons with any of the children, those lessons are to be dismissed and the children are to be sent to Jonel Castle. They immediately need to come here with you, do you understand? The man looked at him in complete surprise. Yes, Lord. Can I ask, has something happened? Yes, something has happened, Tom, that's why I need you to do this with uttermost haste. Can you do that? Ask some of the other guards to help you, so it happens quicker. He responded hastily. Of course, Lord. Right away, Lord. The man said, and he almost ran out the door. Despite the situation, he had to smile. He could always count on the loyal men of Winterfell to help him in his endeavors. He sat down again at his desk and looked once more over Rob's letter. Gods, how was this possible? And why now? He had just managed to start bridging the rift between houses Dustin and Ryswell and his own. This could ruin all of this, and even worse, get Sansa stuck there. Just as he looked up, he saw that he had never even opened Lord Ricard's letter before calling for counsel. He immediately tore open the sun-bearing seal and started reading. Lord Ricard confirmed much of what Robb had said through words of his own heir. He stated that he would send more men to the border to join their sons and was thinking of going himself. He also implored him to take swift action before either his or the Hornwoods' lands would come under threat, as he could not win a war against the Boltons on his own. The Karstark Lord asked him two things as well. First, he asked him what to do with Robb. According to Harryon, Robb was behaving admirably for someone his age, but he might still be too young. The old lord would pull him back with one of his younger sons, if that was what he wanted. Second, he asked what was to be done with the refugees, as he estimated there would be over 100, maybe even many more, flowing in. While pondering those questions, Jory and Roderick entered, swiftly followed by Cat and lastly Lewin, all within the span of seconds. "Ned, what is this about? What happened?" his wife immediately asked. "I've received letters from Robb and Lord Ricard with grave news." He sighed. "Has something happened to Robb? Is he all right?" Cat responded, concern evident in her voice. "No, Robb is fine, although he has heard things that I wouldn't wish him to hear at his age. Here, read this," he said as he handed over Robb's letter to Cat. After which it was passed down to the rest of the group. "These are serious allegations, my lord. Is there any possibility Robb could be wrong?" Roderick asked pensively. "No, Roderick. Lord Ricard sent me another letter with the same information coming from his heir Harryon. The Karstarks are manning their borders and even fear war, if Roose doesn't hand over his bastard son. War, surely that can be avoided, Ned. There hasn't been a civil war in the north in centuries." His wife exclaimed with a gasp. "I hope it does not come to that, but his son and his companions need to be brought to justice. I don't think Roose will like that. My lord, we can't be too hasty. House Bolton, although formidably strong, has no way to win against all of the north. I don't think Lord Bolton will be that rash. We should send him an ultimatum first to at least give him the change to be loyal." Maester Lewin said. "HMMN, of course, however what ultimatum will that be?" he asked to his group of confidants. "Hand over his son and his group or allow us to enter his lands to do it ourselves. If he refuses, we do it without his permission with an army," Sir Roderick Castle said gruffly. Jory nodded, while Lewin added, "That could work, my lord. If you allow him to hand his son over, instead of asking him to dispense justice as his duty as lord, you give him the change to avoid becoming a kinslayer. A thing no northern lord would ever want to become, even on your orders. Nor would I ask it of them. I will send the letter," he said as he nodded to everyone in the group and they all agreed. "Jory, I want you to enlarge the guard by 60 men. Enlist them only from Wintertown or the surrounding villages. Roderick, I want you to train all the men harder for the next coming weeks. It is always better to be prepared for the worst." "That would be all," he said with the most confidence he could muster. It seemed to work as all three men nodded and left. Only his wife remained. She put her hands around him and her head on his shoulders. "Will Robb be all right? Is he in any danger?" she whispered. He put his arms around her and softly stroked her back with his right hand. "No, Robb is not in any danger. He has a large band of Karstark soldiers around him and Lord Ricard will send even more. I do not fear for him, however I do not know if he is all right. He has heard a lot for a boy his age, although he is strong. He has his friends around him to help, and if we can get those monsters to justice, I think he will be fine. If he is anything like me, the thought of them not getting what they deserve could haunt him a long time otherwise. She nodded in his shoulder and he felt the fabric of his tunic become slightly wet from her tears. They stood there for a while, worrying about their firstborn. After what must have been at least 15 minutes they broke away and looked at each other. He kissed her softly and she answered the kiss. She looked at him for a few seconds before nodding, wiping away her tears and smoothing out her dress. I have to take a look at Rukan and the girls. I will see you at the midday meal. He nodded compassionately and she left. He went to his desk, and with a heavy heart, started writing a letter to Roose Bolton. 10 days later. Eddard. It was late in the afternoon, as he sat tired at his desk. He had worked hard these past days to get the situation with the Boltons under control. He had received a letter coming from the Hornwoods. It confirmed rumors of young women and families fleeing from the Bolton border, although in far lesser number than across the last river. His guard was expanded and was being well trained. They were training for a confrontation he hoped would never come to pass. Friendly lords like the Mandalis, Sawins and Umbers were notified, so mustering could commence sooner if needed and crude campaign plans were made with Roderick and Jory. He wanted nothing to be left to fate, if he could help it. In the meantime, a small workforce of 12 laborers and 2 masons was sent to Moat Cailin to begin the works there. As he didn't want this to slow down his plans. He had received another letter from Lord Ricard that they had managed to save 186 refugees. They had also managed to capture 5 of the culprits, who had become overly arrogant and had entered Carstark lands. After torture, those men had confirmed that the Bolton bastard, apparently named Ramsay, was leading them. They also gave away their general position and their strength, which was around 70 men strong. On top of that, they had dozens of trained attack hounds, so that could pose a slight problem. Lord Ricard's sons had taken their heads after the interrogation and pointed them in Bolton colours on spikes on the border. Although a bit gruesome and provocative for his style, he could hardly fault them for it. Suddenly he was interrupted as Lewin barged into his room, without knocking. He looked up surprised as the man never did that before. "A raven has come, my lord. The letter bears the Bolton seal." He immediately stood up and took the letter from Lewin, breaking the pink seal. "To Lord Eddard Stark. I thank you for bringing this to my attention. I had heard rumors, but no one had been able to confirm my suspicions about my bastard and his bunch of friends. I will personally handle the matter and bring them all to justice. In 3 weeks' time, I will arrive at Winterfell to prove you of my loyalty. I have sent my son Domeric to his aunt in Barrowton with a small escort so nothing can happen to him. Your loyal vassal. Roose Bolton, Lord of the Dread Fort." He looked confused at the letter. He let out a sigh, he didn't know he was holding in. He handed the letter over to Lewin, who reacted much the same. "This is good, my lord. I think we should prepare for Lord Bolton's arrival, be it good or bad, and see from there." He nodded and went to tell the others about the news. 3 weeks later. Eddard. He was standing in the courtyard with his family behind him. Although further than he normally would have them, as guests arrived. He had sent out scouts and they had confirmed that the group Roose Bolton was traveling with, could be no more than 60 men. Even so, he had tripled the guard and was awaiting stoically in the courtyard prepared for anything, as the pink banner of the flayed man slowly marched through the gate. He immediately saw Roose, riding at the front of the men. He halted some 30 feet away from him and jumped off his horse. "Lord Eddard, it is good to see you again. I am very sorry about this business these last few weeks and I come here to show my loyalty to House Stark," the man said in his soft voice, although he would better fortune everyone in the yard could understand him. "Lord Bolton, it is my pleasure. Excuse me for the precautions these past weeks, although I thought it necessary considering it affected your family. If you allow me, I will present you to my family," he answered, pointing to his household, lined up at the back. "No offense taken, my lord. I would love to meet your family, however I would like this business to be taken care of first. As to eliminate any doubts about mine, or my house's loyalty," the Bolton lord said with a smile that never reached his pale eyes. "I doubt you would appreciate me showing this in front of your wife and children. So as not to anger you, I would ask if I could meet them somewhere else later on," the liege lord continued. Looking long and hard at the man in front of him, he finally called out without turning around. "Caitlin, take the children and the household inside." Roos nodded his head at that, and a few minutes later, after they had left, he went to his saddlebag, as did all his men. In response, his guards put their hands on their swords and bows. "This should prove my loyalty, Lord Stark," the pale-eyed man said, as he threw what was clearly a head on the grounds of Winterfell. His men followed suit, and soon dozens of heads were laying between his men and the Boltons. "What is this, Roos?" he demanded to know. "These were most of my bastard's friends and their ragtag bunch of criminals," he said, while pointing to all the heads in front of them. He suddenly pointed to the head closest to him, the one the Lord had thrown himself. That was Reek, the man I had sent to educate and help my bastard when he was young. It turned out the man became his first-most lieutenant and companion amidst my bastard's crimes. We caught them all in the woods near the Hornwood